Chapter 48. In the courtyard behind Old Man Ji, Yiling asked softly, "Grandpa Ji, are they in danger?" Old Man Ji stood up and looked at the little girl in front of him with a complicated gaze. She rubbed Yiling's head gently. "Don't worry, they'll be fine. Just stay here with Grandpa Ji and don't run around, alright?" Yiling nodded obediently. "Grandpa Ji, I'll go cook for you." With that, she turned and ran to the kitchen. Her body was trembling slightly because she was worried about her brother's safety. However, she knew very well that she couldn't go to the back mountain at this time because she couldn't help at all. If she went, she would only cause trouble for her brother. In the kitchen, Yiling curled up in a corner and hugged her knees. She didn't cry as she looked at the fire in the stove. At this moment, it was as if she had returned to the Yi family in Qingqing. Back then, when Yi Xian went out during the day, she would wait for Yi Xian for a day. In her world, there was no father, no mother, only her brother. Her brother was her only and everything. In the courtyard, after Yiling left, an old man appeared in front of Old Man Ji. The old man wore a linen robe and his beard reached his chest. His hair was combed into a bun and scattered behind his head. He looked very gentle and refined, forming a huge contrast with the drunk Old Man Ji. This person was the dean of Kuraki Academy, Li Xuanzong. He was also one of the top experts in Jiang country. Li Xuanzong glanced at Old Man Ji and shook his head. "It's been so many years, but you're still the same." Old Man Ji smiled. "You're getting more and more exquisite." Li Xuanzong looked around and said, "There's only one academy in Jiang country. I think it's pretty good." Old Man Ji chuckled. "Isn't Kuraki Academy the biggest in Jiang country now?" Li Xuanzong looked straight at Old Man Ji. "I know what you want to do with the 3 people you found, but they will end up like the people you found in the past. They will eventually become a corpse on Song Mountain's Xiaodao." Old Man Ji nodded. "Let's wait and see," Li Xuanzong said with a smile. "Then let's wait and see." Back mountain. Mo Yunqi stopped, Bai Zai climbed out of the waterfall and Yi Xian stopped blasting the mountain. In front of a dense forest, Yi Xian and the other 2 stood side by side. Yi Xian was in the middle. On his left was Mo Yunqi and on his right was Bai Zai. Opposite them were Qin Yan and the other Kuraki Academy students. Beside Yi Xian, Mo Yunqi suddenly said, "Old Man Ji, let them come up just like that?" Yi Xian looked at Qin Yan and the others in silence. To be honest, although he didn't join Kuraki Academy, he didn't have any enmity or malice towards it. However, there were many times when he couldn't help himself. From the moment he joined Songlan Academy, he was destined to be Kuraki Academy's enemy. Even if he didn't go looking for trouble with the Kuraki students, the students of Kuraki Academy would come looking for him. A feud that could not be resolved with words. However, Yi Xian was never a person who was afraid of trouble. On the contrary, if it was a fight, Yi Xian had never been afraid of anyone in his life. At this moment, Qin Yan suddenly took a step forward. 3 against 3? Yi Xian turned to look at Mo Yunqi and Bai Zai. Both of them nodded, indicating that there was no problem. 2 men walked out from behind Qin Yan. The man on the left wore a black robe that was exquisite yet not lacking in grandeur. In addition, the man on the right wore a white robe. He had a slender figure, sword-like eyebrows, starry eyes, and a cold appearance as if he was a celestial being. Both of them had an extraordinary bearing. Seeing these 2 people, Yi Xian's expression instantly sank. The feeling of danger. This was his instinctive feeling, and he had always firmly believed in his instincts, because these instincts were trained through countless life-and-death street battles. The facts proved that Kuraki Academy didn't look down on them anymore. They wouldn't send small fries for them to practice. Yi Xian glanced at Bai Zai and Mo Yunqi. "Watch out." Both of them nodded. The white-robed man walked over to stand before Mo Yunqi while the dark-robed man walked over to stand before Bai Zai. Obviously, it was Yi Xian against Qin Yan. Right at this moment, the dark-robed man suddenly vanished on the spot. Bai Zai's expression changed drastically, and he swiftly crossed his hands before him. Meanwhile, the dark-robed man arrived before him. Bang! Following the sound of an explosion, Bai Zai was directly pushed back a full 7 to 8 feet. Moreover, there was a deep blood-red handprint on his arms. Right at this moment, the dark-robed man tapped the ground lightly with the tip of his foot, and then he leaped up into the air towards Bai Zai. He was extremely swift, like a hawk pouncing towards its prey. Senshin realm. Yi Xian's expression changed slightly when he witnessed this scene. This man that wasn't even 20 years old was actually at the Ascension realm. Such a young genius at the Ascension realm. In the distance, Bai Zai's expression changed violently as well. He suddenly squatted down and used his feet to support himself from the ground. At the same time he pressed his palms together. In an instant, the muscles on his body bulged up while his veins wriggled like fine snakes. It was an extremely shocking sight. Meanwhile, the dark-robed man slapped his palm down from midair. This palm strike was like an enormous axe, and the formidable might and force contained within it instantly tore through the air. Bai Zai swiftly raised his head, pressed his palms together and formed a seal. Earth and yellow energy surged out from the center of his palm. Obviously it was a martial technique. At the moment that the dark-robed man's palm descended, an ear-piercing explosion instantly resounded. In the blink of an eye, Bai Zai's figure was blasted over 20 m away. However, the dark-robed man didn't stop. His figure shook, and then he drifted towards Bai Zai like a gust of wind. On the other side, the white-robed man who stood before Mo Yunqi had suddenly vanished on the spot. Mo Yunqi's expression changed slightly. He tapped the ground lightly with the tip of his foot and glided over 30 m back. However, he just stopped when the white-robed man had arrived above him. The Ascension realm. Mo Yunqi was shocked in his heart. He didn't dare act carelessly and he retreated repeatedly. At the same time, a flying knife suddenly slashed out from his palm. The white-robed man's figure suddenly flashed in midair, and he dodged the flying knife. Meanwhile, Mo Yunqi was already 30 m away, and he'd pulled open the distance between him and the white-robed man. However, his expression was extremely solemn. The white-robed man didn't waste his breath at all, and he charged towards Mo Yunqi once more. Zhou Xian withdrew his gaze from the distance, and his expression was extremely solemn as well. Because he noticed that Bai Zai and Mo Yunqi had been suppressed by those two people. Obviously they'd investigated Bai Zai, Mo Yunqi and him before they came here. Zhou Xian gazed at Qin Yan, and he had no doubt that Qin Yan was absolutely not an ordinary person. Qin Yan suddenly charged forward, and at the same time, two rays of cold light shot towards Zhou Xian. Dual blades. Zhou Xian's reaction was extremely swift, and he'd smashed his fists against Qin Yan's attack at the same time. It was still the crushing fist, and it was the crushing fist that was enhanced with battle intent. At this moment, the trajectory of Qin Yan's dual blades suddenly changed, and his blades sliced towards Zhou Xian's wrists at a strange angle. At almost the same time, Zhou Xian suddenly spread his arms apart, and then he suddenly kicked towards Qin Yan. His leg was longer than his blades. As soon as Zhou Xian launched his kick, Qin Yan immediately pulled back his sabers to defend himself. Bang! Qin Yan retreated a few meters with his blades, and before he could stop, Zhou Xian had already charged in front of him, and then he smashed his fist towards Qin Yan again. Crushing fist. He only knew this low-level martial arts technique, but the might of this low-level martial arts technique wasn't weak, and a single punch directly crushed the air. Bang! Qin Yan was forced back once again and Zhou Xian pressed forward once more. In an instant Qin Yan was directly suppressed by Zhou Xian, suppressed by his fists. At this moment Zhou Xian was like a small mountain in front of Qin Yan. The strength of his punches was greater than the previous, and his battle intent was also stronger with each punch. Using force to suppress others. Bang! 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 Qin Yan retreated repeatedly. The current him couldn't even unsheath his saber and he could only passively defend. His entire body was already enveloped by Zhou Xian's force. To be precise, it was fist force. Originally, Zhou Xian's fists didn't have any force, but after this period of frenzied mountain bombardment, his fists gradually gained their own force. In addition to his battle intent, a low-level human rank martial arts technique was forcefully beaten into the feeling of a superior grade spirit rank martial arts technique. In a certain courtyard, opposite Old Man Ji, Li Xuanzong retracted his gaze and chuckled. What a great battle intent! He comprehended battle intent at such a young age. Even in the inner court his foundations are top. What a pity, what a pity! He repeatedly said that it was a pity. This was because this youth was originally going to join their Kuraki College. If Zhou Xian joined Kuraki College, it would naturally be another genius for Kuraki College to suck up to. Opposite Li Xuanzong, Old Man Ji was about to speak when Li Xuanzong suddenly said with a smile, "Actually, there's nothing to be pitted about. Not being able to join Kuraki College is his loss. Moreover, he's just a genius. We can just kill him. As he spoke, he looked at Old Man Ji. What do you think? Old Man Ji glanced at Li Xuanzang. Geniuses who don't join Kuraki College will all end up like this, right? Li Xuanzang smiled. If he's not one of us, then he's an enemy. As he spoke, he turned to look at the back mountain. The three of them are not bad, especially that battle-intent youth Zhou Xian. It's a pity that he chose the wrong side. Old Man Ji sneered. It seems like you guys don't want him. Li Xuanzang's expression gradually turned cold. I'd rather Kuraki College betray everyone in the world, but whoever dares to betray Kuraki College will die a horrible death. Conceited? No, to him this was confidence. And Kuraki College also had this confidence. Old Man Ji lay on the chair, drinking wine with a smile on his face. Once upon a time, Songlon College was this arrogant. No, it was even more arrogant. But now, in the back mountain, the battle was still ongoing. Bang! Along with an explosion, a figure was directly sent flying. This figure was precisely Chen Yan. Zhou Xian was about to continue attacking, but at this moment his expression suddenly changed. A sword had silently appeared at the back of his neck. It was a good sword. It was supposed to be a one-on-one duel, but someone suddenly launched a sneak attack. In addition, the sword was extremely fast. Zhou Xian couldn't dodge in time and allowed the sword to pierce the back of his neck. In the courtyard, Old Man Ji suddenly stood up. He stared at Li Xuanzang. You're playing dirty. Li Xuanzang stood up and smiled. From today onwards, everyone will only know one outcome for Dao Yi, and that is that all of your Songlon College students will be killed. Everyone will only care about the outcome and not the process. It's over. After saying that, he turned to leave. At this moment, both of them suddenly turned to look at the back mountain. At the back mountain, when the sword pierced the back of Zhou Xian's neck, Zhou Xian was unharmed. On the contrary, the sword turned into motes of energy and entered Zhou Xian's body. The invincible sword body technique used one's body to forge a sword. As long as the sword that injured him wasn't of a higher level than the sword in his body, he would be immune to it and absorb it. The moment the sword energy was absorbed by Zhou Xian, a terrifying aura suddenly swept out from Zhou Xian's body. The aura of the Qi-controlling realm. PS 3 things. First, why does everyone want to block my card? You can block my card for 100 vertical coins. Let me see how many friends you have. Second, for those who haven't bookmarked this book, please bookmark it. That means adding it to your bookshelf. It's also convenient. You'll be able to see it when you go online. Also tickets. Asking for tickets. Chapter 49. How is this possible? In the courtyard, Li Xuanzang stared at the back mountain with a trace of disbelief in his eyes. The sword entered the body, but it was absorbed. Bible. Could this be the legendary innate sword body? At this point, his pupils suddenly constricted. According to the legends, there were some special physiques, and the innate sword body was one of them. Could swallow swords. People with this kind of physique could be said to be natural swordsmen. And this kind of physique was extremely rare. But once it appeared, it was definitely a heaven-defying existence. At the back mountain. In the instant that Zhou Xian broke through to the Qi-controlling realm, he turned around and threw a punch. Compared to before, this punch was at least twice as powerful. This was the benefit of breaking through. Bang! In front of Zhou Xian, a figure retreated over 10 feet. At this moment, Zhou Xian had a clear look at the person who had launched a sneak attack on him. It was a man in a tight black robe, about 20 years old, with a cold look in his eyes. Obviously, he was a sword cultivator. Moreover, he might be a little bit away from reaching the great swordsman. Because at that moment, Zhou Xian felt a faint sword aura in the sword. The black-robed man stared at Zhou Xian. How could you swallow my sword? Zhou Xian's expression was quite ferocious. We agreed to fight one-on-one, but you played this kind of trick. Die. As his voice fell, he directly rushed out. At the same time, a sword appeared in his palm. Ling Shao sword. When Zhou Xian reached the Qi-controlling realm, he could already control Qi. Therefore, as soon as the Ling Shao sword appeared, wisps of sword aura constantly emitted from the sword. Sword aura. The symbol of the great swordsman. All the students of Kuraki Academy were shocked when they witnessed this scene. The black-robed man opposite Zhou Xian also had a face full of disbelief. Great swordsman, you actually reached the great swordsman. Although he was only a short distance away from becoming the great swordsman, this short distance could trap him for 10 or 20 years or even longer. The black-robed man didn't have much time to think because Zhou Xian had already arrived in front of him, and Zhou Xian slashed down with his sword. As soon as the sword descended, numerous rays of sword light shot out like sharp arrows. The black-robed man's expression changed drastically. He stomped his right foot and used the force from the ground to retreat explosively. However, he was still too slow and a few strands of sword light directly pierced through his chest. Chi. The black-robed man staggered and fell to the ground, blood spurting out from his chest. As soon as Zhou Xian stopped, his expression changed slightly and he swiftly moved to the side. Meanwhile, a white shadow attacked him. It was the white-clothed man who had just fought with Mo Yunqi. At this moment he obviously wanted to save the black-robed man. Zhou Xian was expressionless. Holding the long sword in his hand, he thrust it forward. A strand of sword light flickered at the tip of his sword. The white-clothed man's pupils constricted slightly, and then his hands suddenly trembled violently. A powerful strand of blue energy swept out from within him and formed a blue barrier. However, it wasn't able to stop Zhou Xian's attack. Zhou Xian's sword sliced through the blue barrier, but it stopped when it was just a few inches away from the center of the white-clothed man's forehead. Because the white-clothed man's hands had clamped down tightly onto Zhou Xian's sword. At this moment, a strand of light blue flames emanated from the white-clothed man's hands, and it was exactly these flames that had resisted the sword light emanated by Zhou Xian's sword. Right at this moment, Zhou Xian suddenly pressed forward and kicked the white-clothed man. The white-clothed man reacted extremely quickly, and he immediately let go of Zhou Xian's sword and pressed it down. Bang! Zhou Xian and the white-clothed man retreated explosively by over 10 m at the same time. Zhou Xian had just stopped when Mo Yunqi and Bai Zai arrived on his left and right. At this moment, Bai Zai's upper body was covered in red palm prints, and it was especially so for his chest. It had sunk in severely and it looked rather horrifying. Mo Yunqi wasn't much better off. His entire right arm had been completely fractured and he couldn't move it at all. Moreover, blood was still flowing from the corners of his mouth. Obviously, he was heavily injured. As for the white-clothed man and the black-clothed man, they weren't injured at all. At this moment, the gazes of the white-clothed man and the black-clothed man descended onto Zhou Xian, and they were about to attack. Meanwhile, an old man suddenly appeared before Zhou Xian's group of 3. It was Old Man Ji. Old Man Ji had just descended to the ground when Li Xuanzong appeared before him. Old Man Ji gulped down a mouthful of wine, and then he looked at Li Xuanzong. How about this? I'll let you kill these 3 little fellows. Do you want to kill them? Li Xuanzong narrowed his eyes. He naturally knew what Old Man Ji meant. If he killed Zhou Xian's group of 3, then Old Man Ji would definitely fight to the death. And for an expert of Old Man Ji's level, if he acted recklessly, Kuraki College would definitely suffer a heavy blow. Especially if he attacked the younger generation, Kuraki College had no confidence in protecting the younger generation. Such an expert was very difficult to stop. A moment later, Li Xuanzong suddenly turned to look at Zhou Xian. You're really surprising, but it doesn't matter. Next year there will definitely be your corpse on Song Mountain's Xiaodao. With that, he turned and left with the Kuraki College students. After Li Xuanzong and the others left, Old Man Ji turned to look at Zhou Xian's group of 3. Do you know who the white-clothed man and the black-clothed man were? Zhou Xian's group of 3 shook their heads. Li Xuanzong said indifferently, they are 2 of the 3 great geniuses of Kuraki College's inner courtyard. You should be glad that the other one didn't come today. Otherwise, I would be collecting your corpses right now. Zhou Xian's group of 3 fell silent. Old Man Ji continued, those 2 just now didn't use their full strength, but the 3 of you basically did. I let them come up because I want you to see how weak your current strength is compared to Kuraki College's. Just like what that old fart said, if you don't work hard, your corpses will really be hanging on Song Mountain's Xiaodao in a year's time. At that time, the old man won't even be able to collect your corpses. With that, he turned around and left. However, he stopped after a few steps. That's right. Those 2 just now aren't the best in Kuraki College. The best are Fenju and Beichen. With your current strength, if you were to face them, you would definitely die. In the field, Zhou Xian's group of 3 fell silent. Their expressions were solemn because they knew that Old Man Ji wasn't trying to scare them. They had already seen the strength of the white-clothed man and the black-clothed man. Very terrifying. Even Zhou Xian, who had already reached the qi-resisting realm, didn't have the confidence to say that he would definitely be able to defeat them unless he used one sword to decide life and death. And those two weren't even the strongest in Kuraki College. A sense of crisis. This time all three of them felt a sense of danger. Before this, the three of them were carefree. Even when they cultivated, they were forced to cultivate by Old Man Ji. There were very few voluntary parts. But now the three of them were very clear that if they didn't become stronger, their corpses would definitely be hung on the road in the future. Even Zhou Xian felt danger. No matter what happened in the past, he had to admit that he was now a student of Tsonglan College. He had to bear the grudges between Tsonglan College and Kuraki College even if he didn't want to. Moreover, when Old Man Ji saved his sister, he also promised Old Man Ji that he would do his best to fight against Kuraki College and bring back the corpses from Xiao Dao. Cultivate. The three of them silently left the field and began to cultivate on their own. Zhou Xian was still blasting the mountain. After the battle just now, he had some enlightenment. This time he wasn't just blasting the mountain. After adding battle intent, he tried to make his fists have momentum. Fist momentum. This was definitely the reason why Old Man Ji wanted him to blast the mountain. Punch, punch, punch. 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 The momentum of one punch could split the earth and shatter the mountain. After understanding this, the power and momentum of Zhou Xian's punches became stronger and stronger. Of course, he also paid the price. Both of his hands were already badly mutilated. At night, Zhou Xian was exhausted and sprawled out in front of the small mountain. He lay on the ground and looked at the stars in the sky, gasping for breath. Now he didn't just feel tired, he also felt good. Extremely good. He felt that after venting out all the energy in his body, the feeling was extremely satisfying. As if he thought of something, Zhou Xian suddenly sat up. He opened his palm and a sword floated in his palm. Ling Xiao sword. At this moment, Ling Xiao sword was a little different than before. He couldn't describe this difference, he could only feel it. According to his guess, it should be because he had devoured that sword before. That sword's level wasn't low, it should be a spirit sword. Of course, it was definitely not as good as this Ling Xiao sword. Otherwise, that sword would have directly taken his life. The core of his invincible sword body was the sword. The stronger the sword in his dantian, the stronger his cultivation technique would be, and he could use this cultivation technique to devour even more swords. Sword. Thinking of this, Zhou Xian seemed to have thought of something. He scanned his surroundings and seeing that there was no one around, he immediately entered the prison pagoda. In the endless starry sky, Zhou Xian stood under the pagoda. He raised his head and looked at the top of the pagoda. At the top of it there were 3 swords. From his angle he could only roughly see the 3 swords. He wanted to take a closer look, but it was a pity that he hadn't reached the airborne realm and could fly in the air. Therefore he could only look from afar. Looking at the 3 swords, Zhou Xian's eyes were burning. His intuition told him that if he could use these 3 swords as his dantian, there wouldn't be any sword in the world that he couldn't absorb. At this moment the prison pagoda suddenly trembled. Zhou Xian was stunned, then hurriedly entered the first level. He looked around. Senior. The mysterious woman didn't answer. Zhou Xian frowned. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly raised his head. There was a moment of silence. Thump. Above Zhou Xian's head, footsteps could be heard. When he heard the footsteps, Zhou Xian was stunned. At first he thought that he had heard wrongly, but very quickly, thump 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 thump. The footsteps on the second level were getting louder and louder. Zhou Xian's eyelids twitched. Who? No one answered, but the footsteps were getting louder and louder. In the end, the entire first level of the prison pagoda shook. Chapter 50. Panic. At this moment Zhou Xian was panicking. This was because the mysterious woman had told him that the second level was not a kind person. Since it was not a kind person, it would be very difficult to communicate with them. This meant that once they came out, they would not give him a chance to speak. Senior. Zhou Xian took 2 steps back and looked around. Senior? Are you still there? The mysterious woman still did not reply. Zhou Xian was prepared to escape. At this moment the prison pagoda suddenly trembled. Soon the footsteps stopped and the entrance to the second level returned to normal. Zhou Xian was stunned and hurriedly asked, Senior? Did you attack? Still no one replied. Zhou Xian wanted to ask something else, but at this moment, a white piece of paper suddenly floated out from the entrance to the second level. Paper. Zhou Xian was stunned. Then he took 2 steps forward. At this moment the piece of paper floated in front of him. There was a smiley face on the paper. Below the smiley face were two paw prints which looked like cat paws. Xian. At this moment, another piece of paper floated out from the entrance to the second level and slowly floated in front of Xian. This time there was a wronged face on the paper, and below the face there were also two small paw prints. Suddenly another piece of paper floated out. Soon it floated in front of Xian. This time there was a crying face on the paper, and below the crying face there were also two small paw prints. Xian looked up at the second level. "Do you want me to let you out?" Just as he said this, there was a soft sound from the top of the tower. Xian smiled bitterly. "That I can't let you out for now." After a moment of silence, suddenly, boom. The entire first and second levels of the prison pagoda violently shook, and the powerful impact instantly sent Xian flying. Bang! Xian crashed into the wall of the pagoda and howled in pain. At this moment he felt as if his limbs were about to fall apart. However, before he could get up, an evil aura suddenly appeared on the first level. This aura was so evil that it caused Xian's expression to change greatly. He hurriedly retreated out of the tower. Just as the aura was about to spill out of the tower, a sword in the sky above the world prison tower suddenly trembled slightly. Boom! The evil aura was instantly shattered, and the prison pagoda returned to normal. After a while, Xian saw that the world prison pagoda had calmed down. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. Not daring to stay any longer, he hurriedly left the prison pagoda. In reality, Xian took a deep breath. Find the Tao Law. Only at this moment did he truly realize how terrifying this world prison pagoda was. This was only the second floor, third floor, fourth floor. Just what kind of people were imprisoned here? He had to find the Tao Laws. After Xian calmed down, he washed up and returned to his courtyard. At the entrance of the courtyard, he saw a petite figure sitting in front of the stone steps. It was Yiling. Just like before, no matter how long he went out, when he returned, he would see his little sister Yiling waiting for him. Xian walked in front of Yiling. At this moment, Yiling was already asleep. He gently picked up Yiling. At this moment, Yiling subconsciously hugged him tightly, burying her head in his chest. "Brother." Xian smiled, then carried Yiling back to her room. After covering Yiling with a blanket, Xian left the room. Not far away from the room, Old Man Ji had appeared at the entrance. Old Man Ji said, "Come with me." After saying that, he turned and walked outside. Xian followed. On the way, Old Man Ji gulped down a mouthful of wine and said, "The matter with Kuraki Academy has temporarily come to an end. However, when you leave the mountain in the future, you should be careful. Right now there is a lot of resentment in Kuraki Academy. They all want revenge, but it has been suppressed by Kuraki Academy. Of course they don't want to stop. They are waiting for Fenju and Beichen to return." "They are not at Kuraki Academy?" Xian asked. Old Man Ji said indifferently, "If they were at Kuraki Academy, the ones who came to challenge you that day wouldn't have been those three geniuses. Kuraki Academy doesn't act, but once they do, they will definitely kill." Xian fell silent. Old Man Ji said again, "With me here, Kuraki Academy won't dare to send experts to assassinate you, but that is not absolute. So, when you are outside, you must be careful. Don't be careless and get yourself killed." Xian nodded. "Understood." Old Man Ji suddenly stopped. "There's still half a month before you go to Two World Mountain, right?" Xian looked at Old Man Ji. "Does the dean know?" Old Man Ji nodded. "In the country of Jiang, there are only 2 or 3 people who are qualified. It seems that Enlace really thinks highly of you since she gave it to you." Xian didn't say anything. Old Man Ji hesitated for a moment, then said, "Kid, you're not an ordinary person, but that Enlace is even more so. Kuraki Academy is so domineering, but Enlanxio said she wouldn't join, and Kuraki Academy didn't even dare to fart. From this, you should be able to see how terrifying she is." Xian smiled. "Senior, what are you trying to say?" Old Man Ji said indifferently, "You know very well what I'm trying to say." Xian smiled. "The dean is afraid that I will bring trouble to myself if I get close to her, right?" Old Man Ji nodded. "Enlace doesn't have any ill intentions towards you, but that might not be the case for the people behind her. It's best to stay away from her, or wait until you have absolute strength before approaching her. It's good for you and for her." Xian shook his head. Old Man Ji looked at Xian, and Xian said softly, "We know each other and we're friends. We don't mix in anything else. Old man Ji shook his head. You're too idealistic. You don't mix in with her, but don't tell me others don't mix in as well? Or do you think that the world is a beautiful place and that everyone is reasonable? Yi Xian shrugged. If her family tries to stop me, I'll fight them. I'll beat them until they don't dare to stop me. Old man Ji gave Yi Xian a thumbs up. You've got guts, but unfortunately that's all. Yi Xian was a little speechless. What else can I do? I'll tell Miss Sin that I'm afraid of her family and we can't be friends anymore? Old man Ji looked straight at Yi Xian. Do you really only want to be friends with her, kid? Don't you have other thoughts? Yi Xian blinked. I don't know what you're talking about. With that he walked into the distance. Old man Ji sighed and took a step forward. This step brought him to Yi Xian's side and he said, This is your choice, I won't say anything more. Finally, when you go to the Two-World Mountain you need to be careful of 3 things. The first is obviously Kuraki Academy. The 2 wretched geniuses and 3 prodigies of Kuraki Academy might go. If you come across them, don't try to be brave. You still need to run. The second is to be careful of the people from the Tang Empire. The Tang Empire will definitely send people there as well. The relationship between our Jiang Empire and the Tang Empire is like the relationship between Kuraki Academy and our Zhonglan Academy. With that he paused and continued, Third, you have to be careful of some geniuses from other countries. When you're outside, killing and robbing others is a common occurrence. You have to know that many geniuses rose up by stepping on the corpses of other geniuses. I know you've been fighting and killing since you were young, but the law of survival is even crueler in the outside world. Yi Xian nodded. I'll keep that in mind. Old man Ji took a sip of wine and continued, The fire spirit in your sister's body is being devoured and it won't last long. When we go to the Sword Master's abode, it's located in a volcanic region. If there's a chance, find some fire-attributed items, the hotter the better. Yi Xian bowed slightly. My sister is here, so I'll have to trouble you, Principal. Don't worry, she's safe here, Old man Ji said. He then stopped. Before you go to Two-World Mountain you have to cultivate your fist force. Your force is still not enough. Fist force, fist force, fist force. Before you punch, your aura has already been released. That's the true fist force. As for your own battle intent, don't be too hasty. There's still a process between you and a martial Dao Grandmaster, and this process needs to be completed slowly. Martial Dao can't be rushed, it's best if everything comes naturally. Yi Xian bowed deeply to Old man Ji. I've learned a lot. Old man Ji nodded. Go back and cultivate. Cultivating fist force will be of great help to you when you go to Two-World Mountain. Yi Xian bowed again, then turned around and left. Looking at Yi Xian's departing figure, Old man Ji said softly, He's not in a rush. He's a good seedling. After saying that, he gulped down a mouthful of wine, then turned around and disappeared into the distance. At the back of the mountain, Yi Xian arrived in front of the small mountain again, and very soon, there was a series of rumbling sounds coming from the back of the mountain. Under the waterfall, Bei Zhe was crazily swimming against the flow of the waterfall. Within the mountain, Mo Yunqi was madly fleeing, and this time, it wasn't just one demon wolf chasing him but 2. Bitter cultivation. After fighting with the students from Kuraki Academy, Yi Xian and the other 2 began to cultivate crazily. This was because the 3 of them had seen the strength of the students from Kuraki Academy, and in the future they would definitely have to face them. No one wanted to lose, nor did they want to die. Cultivation. Madly cultivating. In the following period of time, Yi Xian and the other 2 began to cultivate crazily. Apart from eating and sleeping, the 3 of them spent all their time cultivating. This was especially so for Mo Yunqi and Bei Zhe. When the 2 of them had fought with the students from Kuraki Academy, they had been completely suppressed by the other party, and they had not been able to fight back. The 2 of them were proud people and they did not want something like that to happen again. Half a month later, under the bitter cultivation there were naturally some results. Mo Yunqi could already deal with the attacks of the 2 demon wolves with ease, and he could even release flying knives to counterattack at any time. As for Bei Zhe, under the waterfall he no longer needed the chains and he could swim against the flow of the waterfall. His body had gone through a huge change compared to before, and it was not just his body but his strength had also changed greatly. As for Yi Xian, in front of the small mountain, Yi Xian's eyes slightly changed and his whole body was like a statue. After an unknown amount of time, his eyes suddenly opened, and his right hand clenched into a fist. Boom. A formless power swept out from his body. In the distance. Bang. A huge rock that was several zhang wide suddenly shattered. Power. Fist power. At this time Yi Xian suddenly fiercely punched the ground. Boom. With Yi Xian as the center, the ground within a radius of several zhang instantly exploded, and countless gravel shot out in all directions like sharp arrows. Yi Xian stood up and he looked at his own fist and his eyes were filled with excitement. I'm really King powerful. At this time there was a sudden change in the field. Pop. With a loud slap, Yi Xian's whole body directly flew to the mountain wall several zhang away. Bang. The mountain wall trembled slightly and countless gravel fell along with Yi Xian. After a moment Yi Xian slowly got up and at this time, there was a small claw mark on the right side of his face. Chapter 51. Yi Xian was completely dumbfounded. Who hit him? He jumped up, took out his Ling Xiao sword and scanned his surroundings vigilantly. However, he did not discover anything. He retracted his gaze and looked at the Ling Xiao sword. From the body of the Ling Xiao sword he saw a small claw mark on the right side of his face. When he saw this small claw mark, his face immediately darkened. He recognized this claw mark. It was exactly the same as the claw mark on the paper that floated out from the second floor. That guy could come out. Thinking of this, Yi Xian immediately broke out in a cold sweat. He hurriedly returned to the prison pagoda. However, the prison pagoda was incomparably quiet. There was no movement at all. The upper floor was also incomparably quiet. Yi Xian glanced at the entrance of the second floor with a rather strange expression. He could be sure that the one who hit him was this guy on the second floor. However, he could do nothing about it. Go to the second floor and fight with him alone? Wasn't that courting death? He couldn't afford to offend him. He couldn't afford to offend him. Yi Xian touched his burning right cheek, then turned around and left the prison pagoda. At noon. Inside the Azure Water Palace, everyone sat around the table. On the table there were more than 10 dishes. There were meat and vegetables and the aroma assailed their nostrils. This time, Xianxia didn't move his chopsticks. He just licked his chopsticks, not caring about his image at all. Everyone was already used to it. At this moment Old Man Ji suddenly said, after this meal it's time for you guys to leave. Yi Xian looked at Old Man Ji. They are also going to Two Boundary Mountain? Old Man Ji shook his head. I will bring the two of them to a place to train alone. Yi Xian nodded, then looked at Mo Yunqi and Bai Zai. Take care. Bai Zai nodded. You too. Mo Yunqi chuckled. Next time we meet let's spar. Yi Xian smiled. Just as he was about to speak, Yi Ling suddenly snorted. You definitely can't beat my brother. Mo Yunqi rolled his eyes. Yes, your brother is the strongest. He finally understood. In this Songlan Academy, the last person to offend was this little girl. This was because this little girl had a very high status in everyone's hearts. Other than being able to cook, she also knew how to get wine for Geezer Ji and make food for Xianxia in the middle of the night. She especially knew how to wash their clothes. Even Bai Zai was very fond of her. If he offended her, it would be equivalent to offending everyone else. Yi Ling grinned and put a piece of lean meat into Yi Xian's bowl. Brother, eat. Yi Xian gently rubbed Yi Ling's little head, his eyes filled with love. Mo Yunqi suddenly shook his head and sighed. Alas, someone else's sister. Everyone looked at each other and smiled. An hour later, Old Man Ji brought Mo Yunqi and Bai Zai down the mountain. At the foot of the mountain, Mo Yunqi waved at Yi Xian. See you next time, let's have a good fight. Yi Xian smiled. All right. Bai Zai bowed slightly to Yi Xian. Take care. After saying that, he turned around and quickly followed Old Man Ji, who was walking at the front with Mo Yunqi. Yi Xian pulled Yi Ling and turned to walk in front of Xianxia. He looked straight at Xianxia. Is my sister safe here? Xianxia looked at Yi Xian and did not speak. Yi Xian also looked at her and did not speak. At this moment, Xianxia suddenly moved sideways. In the next moment, a blade as thin as a cicada's wing appeared in her hand. In the blink of an eye, she was already 100 feet away. As soon as she stopped, the ground behind her cracked open. It was so deep that one could not see the bottom. Not only that, but there was a mysterious power lingering in the crack. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's pupils shrank and he was extremely shocked. Because it was an artistic conception. Blade intent. This foodie in front of him was actually so powerful. Now that he thought about it, he felt a lingering fear. Because this foodie in front of him had almost killed him with a blade. At this moment Yiling walked in front of Yi Xian. She took out a bag and handed it to Yi Xian. "Brother, there's a pair of shoes in here. I just hooked them in some dry food. I made them. When you go out, fight less and don't hurt yourself. Also, I'll be good here. Don't worry about me." Yi Xian gently rubbed Yiling's little head. "Wait for me to come back." After saying that, he carried the bag and turned to walk into the distance. He was not a pretentious person. Although he could not bear to part with his sister, a real man's ambition was to travel far and wide. When there was something that he had to do, he should do it decisively and not procrastinate. Under Yiling's gaze, Yi Xian's back view became more and more blurry. Yiling did not cry. She just watched until Yi Xian completely disappeared in the distance. She did not look away. After a long time, she turned around and walked to Jianji's side. Then she held Jianji's hand. "Sister Ji, let's go." Jianji glanced at Yiling. "Don't worry." Yiling grinned. "He told me to wait for him to come back, so he will definitely come back. Big brother has never gone back on his word when he promised me." Jianji nodded. She turned to look into the distance and seemed to think of something. She shook her head slightly. "Not a bad man. Unfortunately, he likes men." After Yi Xian left the mountain, he directly went to the cloud ship base of the Drunken Immortal restaurant outside the imperial capital. He was going to Borderline Mountain, so he naturally had to take a cloud ship. However, as soon as he left the city, a group of people rushed out of the city. From their clothes, it was clear that they were students of Kuraki Academy. Ever since Yi Xian killed a student of Kuraki Academy, the students of Kuraki Academy had been thinking about revenge at all times. However, they still had some misgivings. They did not dare to directly go to Songlan Academy to find Yi Xian's group of 3. However, they did not give up. Instead, they constantly sent people to stand guard at the foot of Songlan Academy's mountain. Now that Yi Xian had left the mountain, they received the news and immediately rushed over. Yi Xian stopped in his tracks. Seeing Yi Xian stop in his tracks, the group of Kuraki Academy students also stopped in their tracks. Yi Xian turned around and looked at the group of Kuraki Academy students. One-on-one. One-on-one. Everyone was stunned. So direct? At this moment, a student of Kuraki Academy stood out. He slowly walked in front of Yi Xian and fiercely said, "Yi Xian, you killed a student of my Kuraki Academy. Today I..." At this moment Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. Bang. The man hadn't even finished speaking when his figure was blasted over 10 m away. He was directly crushed. All the students of Kuraki Academy were stunned when they witnessed this scene. "He's so ferocious?" The students glanced at each other and were about to attack together. However, right at this moment Yi Xian suddenly said, "There are so many of you, so why don't all of you attack together? In any case, your Kuraki Academy is shameless. Come on, all of you attack together." The expressions of the students of Kuraki Academy instantly became slightly unsightly when they heard this. Attack together? They'd originally intended to attack together, but after Yi Xian spoke like this, they didn't dare to attack together. Because this was in broad daylight. If they attacked together, even if they won, it wouldn't be good for their reputation. When he saw that the students of Kuraki Academy didn't attack, Yi Xian pointed at them and said, "All of you are just a bunch of little brothers." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. The expressions of the students of Kuraki Academy who stood behind Yi Xian were unsightly to the extreme, but none of them dared to attack. They weren't idiots. Based on how Yi Xian attacked earlier, none of them were a match for Yi Xian at all. Continuing to fight would only be asking to be humiliated. Simply speaking, they'd realized a fact, and it was that only the inner court students could deal with Yi Xian. Just like that, Yi Xian vanished into the distance under the gazes of the students of Kuraki Academy. An hour later, Yi Xian ascended the cloud vessel. This time he was staying in a special classroom. It was naturally because of the violet card. With the violet card, one could stay in a special classroom for free. Yi Xian naturally wouldn't refuse such a good thing because he would be a bastard if he didn't take advantage of it. After the cloud vessel started moving, Yi Xian arrived on the deck. "It's you." At this moment, a slightly familiar voice resounded in Yi Xian's ears. Yi Xian turned around and saw a woman in a red dress standing not too far away from him. She was extremely beautiful, especially her slender figure that made one want to embrace her and play with her. That woman was none other than Mo Suiqing, who'd had a conflict with him. There was a man standing beside Mo Suiqing. The man wore gorgeous embroidered clothes, a golden crown and a jade belt. His face was like white jade and he was extremely handsome. The man's gaze descended onto Zhou Xian and he ceaselessly sized him up. Zhou Xian glanced at Mo Suiqing before withdrawing his gaze, and then he walked to the bow of the vessel. As he watched the scenery below grow smaller and smaller, his yearning for the legendary sword immortal grew stronger. Riding a sword through the world. That was the dream of every swordsman. Seeing that Zhou Xian was ignoring her, Mo Suiqing's expression immediately turned cold. Ever since she was born, no matter where she went, she'd always been the focus of attention. When had she ever been ignored like this? She walked to Zhou Xian's side, and Zhou Xian turned around to look at her with a slight frown. The woman before him was indeed very beautiful. Any man would probably like to look at her, but he really didn't like her. It should be said that he hated her. He really hated this kind of disrespectful and opinionated woman. And Xianxia was still the best. Thinking of that woman in a snow-white dress, Zhou Xian's frown relaxed, and a trace of a smile appeared on his face. Zhou Xian. At this moment Mo Suiqing suddenly smiled and said, "Why? Do you dislike me that much?" Zhou Xian shook his head. "Miss Mo, people of different principles cannot make plans together." Mo Suiqing's eyes narrowed slightly. "I heard that you joined Songlong Academy." Zhou Xian nodded. "Congratulations." Mo Suiqing smiled. Her smile was very bright, but her words were slightly harsh. Zhou Xian nodded and didn't say anything else. He didn't want to say anything, so he turned around and walked to the other side. Mo Suiqing had no intention of letting it go, so she immediately followed him. The competition between Songlong Academy and Songlong Academy will be held in a year. Zhou Xian didn't answer her. Mo Suiqing continued, "I will definitely be there to watch it." Zhou Xian glanced at Mo Suiqing and then he walked to the other side. Mo Suiqing's expression instantly darkened when she saw this, and she seemed to have thought of something. She glanced at the man beside her and smiled. "Brother Mu, look, she doesn't like me at all." The man glanced at Zhou Xian, then at Mo Suiqing, and he didn't say anything. He wasn't stupid, and he naturally understood that the woman beside him wanted to use him as a tool. At this moment Zhou Xian suddenly turned around to look at Mo Suiqing. "Can't you tell that I really dislike you? Can you not King come near me? If you come near me again, I'm really afraid that I won't be able to stop myself from punching you to death." Mo Suiqing. P.S. Thank you to the readers for putting up signs, tipping and voting. Thank you for your support. I also want to thank my old friends who went to other book review sections to help me promote it. I still want to ask for a wave of tickets, and also ask for everyone's help to promote it and collect it. New book is not easy. Chapter 52. Mo Suiqing glared at Zhou Xian. She clenched her fists and her entire body was trembling. The man beside her looked at Zhou Xian in shock. Zhou Xian turned to leave after he finished speaking. At that moment Mo Suiqing suddenly shouted, "How dare you humiliate me?" Zhou Xian stopped in his tracks. He turned around and walked in front of Mo Suiqing. "Humiliate you? I've already let you off twice. You're the one who's chasing after me, all right?" As he spoke he pinched Mo Suiqing's cheeks. "Miss Mo, ask yourself honestly. Apart from your face and your identity, what else do you have? Or rather, without this face, without the identity of the Mo family, do you think there will still be men around you? They surround you. Do you think they really like you? No, they only like your face and identity. Without your face and identity, you're worthless in their eyes." With that, he let go of her and said, "You think you're toying with those men, but forgive me for being blunt. Is there any meaning in toying with those men? Is there any meaning? Any man with a little bit of intelligence wouldn't be toyed with by you. Missin is right. Your Mo family is a big family after all. Don't you think you're embarrassing your family by doing these kinds of things all day long? Think about it. Also, don't try to scheme against me. I don't want to be hunted down by your Mo family after I kill you with a single punch." With that he turned around and left. Mo Suiqing clenched her fists tightly. Her expression was cold and no one knew what she was thinking. Zhou Xian returned to his private room. He didn't particularly hate Mo Suiqing, but he didn't have a good impression of her either. She was too self-righteous. Without thinking about Mo Suiqing, he returned to the prison pagoda. "Senior." Yi Xian said in a low voice after glancing around. The surroundings were extremely quiet. The mysterious woman still didn't reply. Yi Xian's expression sank. He was a little flustered without the mysterious woman around. Right at this moment, a piece of paper suddenly floated out from the entrance to the second level. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched when he saw this piece of paper. It's here again. Soon that piece of paper floated in front of him. On it was a calm face. It was very calm and it was impossible to tell whether it was happy or angry. And under this calm face there was a claw mark. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. He scanned his surroundings and hurriedly exited the world prison pagoda. What kind of existence was imprisoned on the second floor? Yi Xian was filled with doubts. However, no matter what was locked up, there was one thing he was sure of, and that was that it was definitely not something he could fight against right now. Hurry up and find that whatever Dao law. Yi Xian made up his mind. In the following time, Yi Xian began to cultivate crazily. Now that he was in the qi-controlling realm, he had yet to fully comprehend this realm, especially the application of sword qi and sword ray. Unfortunately, the mysterious woman had not spoken recently, so he could only rely on himself to slowly explore the application of sword qi and sword ray. Something worthy of mentioning was that it wasn't so difficult for him to execute determine life and death with a swing of the sword now. Moreover, the might of determine life and death with a swing of the sword had increased greatly. His current determine life and death with a swing of the sword was entirely capable of killing a levitation realm expert. Moreover, determine life and death with a swing of the sword could be said to be his greatest killer move and trump card. In the following time, Yi Xian started to practice his sword and fist techniques like a madman. No matter if it was his sword or fist techniques, he didn't want to use any of them. Time passed very quickly. 2 days later, the cloud ship started to descend slowly. He'd arrived at Two World City. Yi Xian left the room and came to the deck of the cloud ship. He stood at the bow of the ship and looked down. Two World City was growing larger and larger. He was slightly surprised when he saw Two World City, because there were soldiers standing on the walls of Two World City. Moreover, there were over 1,000 soldiers training below the city. Overall, the movements of these soldiers were neat and orderly, and they carried a murderous aura. It was obvious that they were sharp troops. In next to no time, the cloud ship stopped steadily in Two World City, and Yi Xian leaped off the cloud ship. Suddenly, a figure appeared before him. It was Mo Suiqing. Yi Xian's brows knit together slightly, and he was about to speak when Mo Suiqing spoke abruptly. Remember this. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and left. How inexplicable. Yi Xian shook his head and then he withdrew a map. Old Man Ji had given him this map before he came here, and it contained the exact location of the sword master's abode. It didn't take long for him to find it. Yi Xian didn't stay in the city, and he dashed directly out of the city and towards the mountain range on the right. It didn't take long for him to enter the boundless mountain range. He wasn't unfamiliar with mountains at all. Around 4 hours later, Yi Xian walked along the direction indicated on the map. The air grew hotter the deeper he went, and another 2 hours passed before Yi Xian stopped. 3 mountains stood in a triangular formation not too far away from him, and there was a gorge at the center. I've arrived. Yi Xian was just about to continue forward when a shapeless pressure suddenly enveloped him. Yi Xian's expression changed slightly, and he glanced at the surroundings but didn't notice anyone. Proof of qualification. A voice suddenly resounded by Yi Xian's ear. Yi Xian hurriedly took out the jade pendant and Lanxiu had given him and he waved it around. In next to no time the pressure vanished completely. Yi Xian continued forward and it didn't take long for him to enter the gorge. At the moment he entered the gorge, the Ling Xiao sword within him actually trembled and was about to charge out of his body. Yi Xian was shocked and he hurriedly suppressed the Ling Xiao sword. What's going on? Yi Xian's brows knit together tightly, and his heart was filled with bewilderment. You're here. Right at this moment, a voice suddenly resounded from Yi Xian's right. Yi Xian looked over and saw a woman standing on his right. The woman wore a silver dress and there was a golden curved blade hanging from her waist. Ninth Princess. Yi Xian walked in front of the ninth princess and asked in surprise, "You knew that I was coming?" The ninth princess sized up Yi Xian and nodded, "Follow me." With that she turned and walked to the side. Yi Xian thought for a moment and then followed. On the way, the ninth princess didn't speak and Yi Xian couldn't help but ask, You knew that I was coming? He's my close friend. The ninth princess replied. Xianxia. Yi Xian understood. Needless to say, Xianxia must have told the ninth princess about the jade pendant. Soon, under the ninth princess's lead, the two of them came to a dense forest. The ninth princess sat on the ground and she signaled for Yi Xian to sit down as well. Yi Xian didn't hesitate and directly sat on the ground. The ninth princess took a branch and drew a circle on the ground. This cave was left behind by the Azure World Sword Master. As for who the Azure World Sword Master is, I won't introduce him. In any case, he was a person who once stunned the entire Azure world. This cave was not left behind by him at his peak, but in his early years. Even so, its value is immeasurable. And this time, those who are participating in the development of this cave are the big shots countries and some sects in the mountains. With that, she paused for a moment and looked at Yi Xian. No one force can monopolize this cave. Not a single power could monopolize this abode. Thus, in order to avoid a huge dispute, the higher-ups issued some qualification orders, allowing the younger generation of each power to enter and search for fortuitous encounters. In short, this time not only the people from the country of Jiang are coming, but there are also geniuses from other countries and some sects' disciples. This time you will see the geniuses from the country of Jiang. Yi Xian suddenly asked, Are there people from Kuraki College coming too? The ninth princess looked at Yi Xian. Yes, but I don't know who will come this time. Yi Xian nodded and didn't say anything else. Anyway, at most they would just fight. As if knowing what Yi Xian was thinking, the ninth princess looked at him. Remember, you are here to search for opportunities, not to fight and kill. Yi Xian chuckled. I won't take the initiative to fight with them. I'm just afraid that they will hit me when they see me. You also know about the matter between Tsonglan College and Kuraki College. The ninth princess nodded. We'll talk about it when the time comes. With that, she seemed to have thought of something and suddenly looked up at Yi Xian. If I remember correctly, you are a swordsman? Yi Xian nodded. The ninth princess was silent for a moment and then said, Don't easily expose your identity as a swordsman later. What? Yi Xian didn't understand. The ninth princess said in a deep voice, This is the cave residence of the Firmament Sword Master, and the Firmament Sword Master is a swordsman. A swordsman coming here will definitely have some advantages. If you expose your identity as a swordsman, it is very likely that you will be targeted. With that said, she looked to the right. After entering, opportunities are not to be found but to be snatched. Whoever snatches it will own it. Yi Xian was speechless. At this time, the ninth princess took out 2 green pills and with a flick of her finger one of them flew to Yi Xian. Poison avoidance pill just in case. Yi Xian nodded and directly swallowed it. The ninth princess saw that Yi Xian ate it without any hesitation and looked at Yi Xian. You trust me so much? Yi Xian said softly, I trust her. Xianxia. Since Xianxia was the close friend of the ninth princess, there was no doubt that this person in front of him was absolutely trustworthy. The ninth princess looked at Yi Xian. You like her? Yi Xian was speechless. The ninth princess retracted her gaze, and then swallowed her poison avoidance pill. Work hard. Yi Xian was about to speak, but at this moment suddenly footsteps came from not far away. Yi Xian and the ninth princess turned to look at the source of the footsteps. It was a man in his 20s, burly and had a beard on his face. Seeing the person who came, Yi Xian frowned because the person in front of him was wearing the clothes of the Tang Empire. When he saw Yi Xian and the ninth princess, the burly man was slightly stunned. Obviously he also came here by accident. He was about to leave, but at this moment he suddenly looked at the ninth princess not far away, and his eyes narrowed slightly. Country of Jiang. The ninth princess retracted her gaze and leaned against a tree. The burly man glanced at the ninth princess, and the corners of his mouth suddenly curled up, and his smile was somewhat obscene. I like to sleep with the women of the Jiang Empire, it's comfortable. At this moment Yi Xian, who was originally sitting on the ground, suddenly jumped up, and in the next moment he rushed directly in front of the burly man like a cheetah pouncing on its prey. The latter's expression changed drastically. It was too late to retreat and the burly man could only hurriedly throw a punch. At this moment Yi Xian also threw a punch. Fist collapse. Not only was this punch mixed with battle intent, but it also contained a fist aura pressure. The two fists collided. Bang. Crack. The burly man's entire body was directly thrown out, and at the same time his entire arm was directly fractured, turning into a strange shape. After sending the burly man flying with a punch, Zhou Xian immediately rushed over. After a breath's time, Zhou Xian carried the burly man who was constantly wailing in pain and arrived in front of the ninth princess. He kicked the burly man. Apologize. The ninth princess glanced at Zhou Xian. Apologize for what? In the next moment she suddenly pulled out the golden saber at her waist, and slashed at the burly man's throat. The burly man's head was directly separated from his neck. The ninth princess put away the golden saber and she held the bloody head, then glanced at Zhou Xian. You're not ruthless enough, learn. You should have companions. Let's go, I'll bring you to kill someone. Zhou Xian was speechless. Chapter 53. Zhou Xian was dumbfounded. Am I not ruthless enough? In all fairness, he felt that he was ruthless enough. Of course, the ninth princess seemed to be a ruthless character as well. At this moment, the ninth princess, who was not far away, suddenly stopped. She turned around to look at Zhou Xian. What are you waiting for? Let's go and kill someone. Zhou Xian was speechless. Just like that, Zhou Xian followed the ninth princess and walked into the distance. However, when he left, he searched the burly man's body and gained quite a lot. He obtained quite a few upper spiritual stones. Including the ones he had saved before, he now had a total of 15 upper spiritual stones. In addition, he also had about 100 gold coins. It was not a small amount of wealth. Under the ninth princess's lead, the two of them arrived at a ravine. In the ravine, Zhou Xian saw two people. Judging from their attire, they were undoubtedly from the Tang Kingdom. There were some differences in the customs and attire between the Tang Kingdom and the Jiang Kingdom, especially their accents. In the distance, the two men were stunned when they saw the ninth princess and Zhou Xian. They were from the Jiang Kingdom? Soon, their eyes fell on the bloody head in the ninth princess's hand. When they saw the head, their expressions instantly turned cold. At this moment, the ninth princess suddenly threw the head to one of the men. At the same time, she rushed out like a gust of wind. So fast. Zhou Xian's pupils constricted slightly. The ninth princess's strength had greatly exceeded his expectations. Without thinking too much, he rushed out as well because one of the men was also rushing towards him. When he arrived in front of the man, Zhou Xian punched out without thinking. Fist force. When he punched out, some of the stones around him directly exploded. When the man opposite Zhou Xian sensed the power in Zhou Xian's fist, he was shocked. He did not dare to be careless and quickly stopped. He half squatted and suddenly crossed his arms. Crack. The ground beneath the man's feet cracked open. At the same time, the sleeves of the man's arms exploded apart. At this moment, his arms had actually turned crimson gold and they were as hard as gold. At this moment, Zhou Xian's fist arrived. Bang. Following the sound of an explosion, the man was pushed back several feet and Zhou Xian was also pushed back several feet. After Zhou Xian stopped, he looked at his fist. His fist was red. Seeing this scene, Zhou Xian narrowed his eyes slightly. As expected, none of the people who came were simple. Right at this moment, the man suddenly took a stride forward and he directly arrived in front of Zhou Xian. The man suddenly smashed his arms down towards Zhou Xian, and then numerous explosions instantly resounded in the surroundings as soon as his arms descended. What terrifying strength! Zhou Xian slowly clenched his right hand tightly, and the will to fight condensed on his fist. He was just about to attack when a shadow suddenly flashed in front of him. In the next moment, the man's head flew into the air. Zhou Xian looked in front of him with astonishment. There was a woman standing in front of him. A silver dress and a golden saber. It was the ninth princess. One strike and one kill. Zhou Xian's mind went blank. The ninth princess put her golden saber away, turned around and walked over to Zhou Xian. She just stared at Zhou Xian. Why didn't you use your full strength? Zhou Xian was speechless. The ninth princess stared straight at Zhou Xian. You're a swordsman. You could have used your full strength to kill him in the shortest time possible, so why did you hold back? Do you know that if you don't end the battle as soon as possible, then it's very likely that you'll attract more enemies and be besieged by even more people? Zhou Xian was silent. The ninth princess took another step forward. Her eyes were as sharp as knives and her voice was a little colder. This isn't a place for you to train. Here, if you don't kill others, then others will kill you. Zhou Xian smiled bitterly. I understand. The ninth princess said coldly, "Be serious." Yi Xian said seriously, "I understand." The ninth princess nodded slightly. "Follow me." Yi Xian tidied up the spoils of war and obtained 5 top-grade spirit stones and more than 50 gold coins. Right now he had 20 high-grade spirit stones and 150 gold coins. Looking at the small bag on his waist, Yi Xian smiled foolishly and hurriedly followed. Under the ninth princess's lead, the two of them came to a hidden cave. The ninth princess sat cross-legged on the ground and started a fire. Then she took out a chicken and started roasting it. Yi Xian was dumbfounded because when they came, the ninth princess was empty-handed. The ninth princess glanced at Yi Xian. "Why? Curious?" Yi Xian nodded hurriedly. The ninth princess flashed a ring on her finger. A storage ring. It has its own space inside and can store some things except for living things. Yi Xian blinked. "Can I have a look?" The ninth princess was generous. With a tap of her finger, the storage ring flew directly to Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked at the storage ring carefully, his eyes full of curiosity. "How many things can be stored in it?" The ninth princess said lightly, "About the size of a room." Yi Xian was stunned, then asked, "How much does it cost to buy one?" The ninth princess glanced at Yi Xian. 500,000 gold coins, there's no market for it. 500,000. Yi Xian was stunned on the spot, then returned the ring to the ninth princess. 500,000 gold coins. What a joke, he couldn't afford it even if he sold himself. The ninth princess glanced at the storage ring, then said, "If you want, I can give it to you." Yi Xian shook his head decisively. The ninth princess was a little surprised. "Why?" Yi Xian said, "Where there is gain there must be loss." The ninth princess looked at Yi Xian and said seriously, "Come to my army, I will protect you in the future." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "I promised old man Ji I am now a student of Songlan Academy, I have to keep my word." The ninth princess nodded, not saying anything else. If Yi Xian agreed so decisively, she would be unwilling. A person must have strength, but he must also have a good character. Yi Xian turned to look outside the cave. "When do we enter the Sword Master's cave abode?" The ninth princess said, "Tomorrow." "Tomorrow is the deadline, those who should be here will be here." Yi Xian took a look at the ninth princess. "You are very strong." The ninth princess said indifferently, "That is because you have not seen more monsters and geniuses. The state of Jiang is very small, Qingzhou is very big. After tomorrow, you will find that there are many outstanding people in this world. This is nothing, the most terrifying thing is that those outstanding people are very hard-working." Yi Xian sat in front of the ninth princess. "You and Missin are both outstanding." The ninth princess tore a chicken leg and threw it to Yi Xian. Although Shaoan was born in the state of Jiang, her background is not ordinary. It will be very stressful to be friends with her. And if you have other ideas, the pressure will be even greater than the sky. Yi Xian nodded. "I will work hard to become stronger." The corner of the ninth princess' mouth lifted slightly. "I like your temperament." After saying that, she lay on the side of the mountain wall. "Sleep after eating, tomorrow we will enter the mountain to kill people." Yi Xian. The night passed. At dawn the next day, Yi Xian and the ninth princess left the cave and went straight to the depths of the mountain. The two of them arrived in front of a large mountain. Halfway up the mountain there was a huge cave entrance. Around the cave entrance there was actually a sword light snaking around. "That is the entrance?" Yi Xian asked. The ninth princess nodded. The big shots above forcibly broke an entrance. It is said that when they broke this entrance, 2 Nether Passage realm experts died. Therefore, when we enter later, besides being careful of the people, we have to be more careful of the unknown existences inside. Yi Xian nodded. Understood. The two quickened their pace, but at this moment, a man in black suddenly flashed past them at an extremely fast speed. Yi Xian's heart skipped a beat. This person's speed was not much slower than Mo Yunqi's. Indeed, no one who came here was simple. When the man passed by the two, he suddenly turned to look at Yi Xian and the ninth princess, sneered, and then made a throat-slitting gesture. Yi Xian, the man in black, did not stop, but instead sped up and disappeared into the distance. Yi Xian was about to speak. "Ah!" At this moment, a shrill scream suddenly sounded in the distance, and in the blink of an eye, a bloody head rolled in front of the ninth princess and Yi Xian. Yi Xian was struck dumb at the sight of the head. Because this bloody head belonged to the black-robed man from before. It was gone just like that. Next to Yi Xian, the ninth princess said calmly, "This kind of person is obviously a first-timer. In the outside world, if you are not particularly powerful like Shaoan, it is best to keep a low profile." Yi Xian nodded seriously, "I will keep a low profile." The ninth princess suddenly turned to look at him. "What low profile? You have to keep a low profile when you need to, or others will think that you are easy to bully." As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly pulled out the golden saber from her waist and slashed in the distance. Flash. A golden saber radiance flashed in the field, and a large tree over 100 feet away exploded. At the same time, a figure was sent flying over 100 feet away. The ninth princess looked at the figure in the distance coldly. Scram. The figure did not say anything, and with a shake of his body he immediately fled. The ninth princess looked around coldly. "Trash, don't come out, you are wasting my saber energy." Yi Xian. The ninth princess turned to look at Yi Xian. "Let's go." The two of them continued forward, and soon they arrived at the entrance where a long-haired man sat. The man's hair was extremely long, even longer than a woman's, and half of the man's face was covered by his long hair. The man held a blood-red saber in his hand, and there were a few bloody heads at his feet. At this moment the long-haired man looked up at the ninth princess and Yi Xian, and he grinned, revealing a mouth full of yellow teeth, and his smile was extremely horrifying. Apart from that, the man's appearance was also extremely ugly, as if he had been burnt by fire. The long-haired man suddenly held the long saber and lightly stomped on the ground, and said in a hoarse voice, 100 upper spiritual stones as a toll fee." The ninth princess looked at the long-haired man. "It's not your fault that you are ugly, but it is your fault that you disgust me." As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. "Kill him." Yi Xian. Chapter 54. Yi Xian hadn't even attacked when the long-haired man suddenly strode forward with his saber in hand, and then he slashed at Yi Xian. This saber slash was bold and domineering. Yi Xian's expression turned cold. He didn't hold back this time, and the battle intent within him surged into his right arm like a tide. At the same time he clenched his right hand into a fist. Bang! At the moment he clenched his fist, a strand of invisible force suddenly surged out from his fist, and it forcefully resisted the overbearing force released by the long-haired man. The long-haired man's eyes narrowed slightly, and there was a trace of seriousness in his eyes. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly stomped his right foot. Bang! The ground instantly exploded apart. Yi Xian shot out like an arrow released from a bow. Bang! An ear-piercing explosion resounded abruptly. In an instant, both Yi Xian and the long-haired man retreated repeatedly. But it didn't take long for Yi Xian to stop. At the moment he stopped, the long-haired man stabbed his saber into the ground as well, and he relied on the force within the saber to stop himself. Yi Xian was about to continue attacking when the long-haired man suddenly said, "Both of you go in." Obviously he'd noticed that both Yi Xian and Yi Xian were ferocious figures, and he didn't want to fight them head-on. Yi Xian was slightly stunned when he heard the long-haired man, and then he turned to look at the ninth princess. However, she wasn't where she was standing anymore. Yi Xian swiftly turned to look at the long-haired man. At this moment, the ninth princess was standing in front of the long-haired man. The ninth princess drew her golden saber 3 times in succession. An extremely ear-piercing and sharp sound resounded every single time she drew her saber. When the saber descended for the 3rd time, the surroundings suddenly fell silent. The ninth princess sheathed her saber and turned to look at Yi Xian. Such an ugly person doesn't deserve to live. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and walked towards the nearby entrance. Brother Yi glanced at the long-haired man. After a moment of silence, the long-haired man's body was torn into pieces, and his blood and internal organs splattered all over the ground. Brother Yi shook his head. "Brother, be more handsome in your next life." As soon as he finished speaking, he collected the corpse and hurriedly followed. He'd gained quite a lot. Right now he had 50 high-grade spirit stones and 400 gold coins. Obviously the long-haired man had robbed quite a lot. Looking at the bulging bag on his waist, Yi Xian sighed inwardly. The fastest way to get rich was undoubtedly robbing people. He realized that he seemed to like the feeling of robbing. After they entered the cave was filled with all sorts. The cave was filled with Xiao Dao. The ninth princess furrowed her brows when she saw this. As soon the Yi Shao Tian sword Yi Tian's Wu Tian, and turned to look at Princess Xiao. Xiao Xiao Long Yishi. The ninth princess stopped and turned to look at Yi Xian. What's the matter? Yi Xian was silent for a moment. He suddenly looked at one of the Xiao Dao and said, "From here." He felt that the Ling Xiao sword in his body was guiding him. The ninth princess looked at Yi Xian for a long time and asked, "Are you sure?" Yi Xian nodded. The ninth princess nodded. "Then let's go." Yi Xian trusted her because of Enlanxiao. She also trusted Yi Xian. Other than the fact that Yi Xian had fought against the Tang army alone, a large part of the reason was because of Enlanxiao. The person that Enlanxiao had taken a liking to must have a good character. The two walked towards one of the Xiao Dao. As they went down, Yi Xian's expression became more and more serious. Because on the way he had already encountered several corpses. All of them had died tragically. As the ninth princess had said, opportunities were not found but snatched. The two walked down the Xiao Dao. After walking for about an hour, Yi Xian realized that they were already at the bottom of the mountain. "Are you sure you didn't go the wrong way?" the ninth princess suddenly asked. Yi Xian nodded. "Let's go down." The Ling Xiao sword in his body gave him the feeling that they were going down. The ninth princess nodded and did not say anything else. She continued to follow Yi Xian down. After walking for about an hour, the two stopped. In front of them was a mountain wall. There was no way out. The ninth princess looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian walked to the mountain wall and punched. Boom! Yi Xian punched a huge hole in the mountain wall. Outside the hole there was another world. The ninth princess walked to Yi Xian's side and looked over. Outside the hole she could vaguely see an underground palace. And above the underground palace, there was a black sword floating. The ninth princess turned to look at Yi Xian. "How did you know that the sword master's true location is here?" Yi Xian smiled bitterly as he took out the Ling Xiao sword. "This sword told me." The ninth princess glanced at the Ling Xiao sword, then looked straight at Yi Xian. "Are you stupid? If I ask you, you'll just tell me?" As she spoke, she lightly patted Yi Xian's shoulder. "Be more careful in the future." With that, she turned and walked towards the distant palace. Yi Xian was a little speechless. He naturally knew how to be careful. However, the ninth princess in front of him was Enlanxiao's close friend. Moreover, after interacting with her, he felt that the ninth princess was someone he could make friends with, so he did not hold back. Making friends was about sincerity. If he didn't want to make friends, then so be it. Once he did, Yi Xian would definitely be sincere. This was his principle. The two of them passed through the hole and arrived in front of the palace. The palace was not particularly big. Although there was an unknown dim light illuminating the surroundings, it made the palace look even more eerie and terrifying. Yi Xian raised his head and looked at the black sword above the palace. The sword was more than 3 feet long, and its entire body was pitch black as if it was cast with ink. However, the tip of the sword was blood red, just like a dot of cinnabar. The sword was floating above the palace. Looking at the sword, Yi Xian's eyes suddenly burned with passion. His intuition told him that the grade of this sword was not low. At this moment, the ninth princess suddenly walked towards the entrance of the palace. Yi Xian suddenly grabbed her arm and she looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian shook his head and let go. He raised his head to look at the entrance of the palace and he frowned. His instincts told him that there was danger. Just at this moment, Yi Xian and the ninth princess suddenly turned their heads. A man and a woman were walking towards the palace on their right. The man wore an ink-white robe and the woman wore an ink-white dress. Both of them had extraordinary bearings. Both of them glanced at Yi Xian and the ninth princess without saying a word. Hee hee. At this moment, laughter suddenly resounded. In next to no time, a shadow flashed, and then a man appeared on the stone steps below the entrance of the palace. The man wore a loose black robe, and his hands were hidden in his sleeves while he wore an evil smile on his face. Tap tap. The sound of footsteps resounded. Everyone looked over towards the source of the footsteps, and they saw a woman walking over slowly from not too far away. The woman wore a cloud-colored dress that trailed behind her. Her figure was slender and graceful, and her waist was bound by a white ribbon, causing her figure to seem even more slender. Her features were extremely exquisite as well, and every single one of them seemed as if they'd been meticulously carved by the heavens. However, her peerlessly beautiful face was slightly cold and devoid of emotion. It was like a 10,000-year-old piece of ice, and it was terrifying. "It's her." The ninth princess who stood by Yi Xian's side frowned. Yi Xian turned around to look at her and asked, "Who?" The ninth princess spoke indifferently, "One of the two great geniuses of Kuraki Academy, Bei Chen." Kuraki Academy. Yi Xian turned around to glance at the woman called Bei Chen. She wouldn't be looking to fight me, right? Even though he wasn't afraid, it would only be disadvantageous to him if they were to fight right now. Everyone watched as Bei Chen walked over to the side, and then she closed her eyes slowly. She didn't speak a single word. But it didn't take long for her to open her eyes again, and then she gazed behind Yi Xian and the ninth princess. Yi Xian and the ninth princess turned around, and a man was walking over from not too far away from them. The man's hair was very disheveled like a chicken's nest, and he wore very simple clothes that were even riddled with holes. Moreover, he carried a pitch-black heavy axe on his back. The expressions of everyone here turned solemn when they saw this man. Even the ninth princess had a trace of seriousness in her eyes. The man glanced at everyone here and then he walked over to the side in silence. The atmosphere in the surroundings suddenly became slightly heavy. Right at this moment, the black-robed man's gaze suddenly descended onto the ninth princess. "I presume that you're the renowned ninth princess of the Jiang Kingdom." The ninth princess spoke indifferently. "Do you have any advice for me?" The black-robed man chuckled. "I wouldn't dare. I heard that the ninth princess and the number one genius of the Jiang Kingdom and Xianxia are close friends." "What? That Guoshuren isn't here?" "The Guoshuren." The expressions of everyone here changed slightly when they heard these two words. Even the man with the heavy axe on his back turned around to look at the ninth princess. And Xianxia wasn't just renowned in the Jiang Kingdom, she was extremely renowned throughout the various kingdoms. It wasn't just the various kingdoms, even some of the powers in the mountains had heard of her name. The ninth princess blinked. "How do you know that she isn't here?" The corners of the black-robed man's mouth gradually curled up when he heard the ninth princess, and his smile was slightly evil. "It's good that she's here. Let me see if the renowned Guoshuren is worthy of his reputation or if he possesses an undeserved reputation. She'll beat you to death." The ninth princess spoke indifferently. "You're not on the same level as her." As Xianxia's close friend, perhaps no one was more clearly aware of how terrifying Xianxia was. She was the sort of person that could make monstrous geniuses feel despair. The black-robed man smiled. "Is that so? Then I really look forward to it." The ninth princess paid no attention to the black-robed man. She glanced at the crowd and said, "Since no one wants to take the lead, then I'll do it." Everyone has arrived at the location of the sword master's true body, but no one dared to be the first to enter. I presume everyone has sensed the danger. If this stalemate continues, everyone will have misgivings about each other and no one will benefit. I have a suggestion. Let's work together first. As for when we'll end our cooperation, I believe everyone will know. What do all of you think? After a moment of silence, everyone nodded to indicate that it was pointless. The ninth princess raised her head and looked at the palace door. "Who'll go first?" On the stone steps, the black-robed man chuckled. "Then let me start first." As soon as he finished speaking, he flicked his finger and a black object shot out from the tip of his finger. Bang! The palace door shattered with a bang. On the other hand, everyone was on their guard as if they were facing a formidable enemy. Just at this moment, a voice suddenly resounded from within the palace. "You're here." Everyone was speechless. P.S. A reader almost moved me yesterday. He sent me a private message. "Qing Luan, it's fine if you don't update for 2 days." Seeing this, I'm so touched that I'm about to cry. At this moment he added, "If you're beaten to death by a reader, I'll ask for donations from the readers and will bury you properly." Chapter 55. You're here? Everyone was stunned and puzzled. "Come in." At this moment the voice in the hall sounded again. Everyone looked at each other but no one dared to move. Because no one expected that there would be someone else in the hall. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly walked into the hall. Everyone's gaze fell on Yi Xian and the ninth princess hurriedly pulled him back. "What are you doing?" Yi Xian was stunned. What was he going to do? No, it was the Ling Xiao sword. Yi Xian's face darkened. Just now there was a mysterious force that drove him into the hall, and this mysterious force definitely came from the Ling Xiao sword. Was the Ling Xiao sword related to the sword master in front of him? Sword master? Thinking of this, Yi Xian suddenly came to a realization. Didn't he have a fallen sword master in the prison pagoda? Could it be related to the sword master? At this moment the black-robed man suddenly said, "The timid will starve to death and the bold will die. I'll go first." With that, his entire body turned into a wisp of black smoke and floated in. Seeing that the black-robed man was the first to enter, the surrounding people also rushed in. Yi Xian and the ninth princess hurriedly walked in as well. When everyone entered the palace, they were all shocked. The palace was filled with wooden statues of men. At a glance, there were close to 1,000 of them. These statues all had the same face. From the appearance, it should be a youth, and on the waists of these statues there was a wooden sword. When he saw these wooden swords, Yi Xian was stunned on the spot. Ling Xiao sword. These wooden swords were exactly the same as the Ling Xiao sword. Most importantly, the two words Ling Xiao were engraved on the bodies of these wooden swords. What the hell was this? Yi Xian was dumbfounded. At this moment, everyone suddenly turned their heads to look not far away. In the corner of the hall, a long-haired woman was squatting on the ground and carving a piece of wood. The woman was squatting on the ground. The long dress she wore had long lost its original appearance. Her hair was also extremely long, directly touching the ground, and her long hair was snow white. Little by little, she carved the wood in front of her very carefully and seriously. The expressions of everyone here instantly became vigilant when they saw this woman. Right at this moment, the long-haired woman suddenly said, "If you're here to search for treasures, you can go to the small bamboo house behind this hall. There are some things that he once left behind there." Everyone looked at each other when they heard the long-haired woman's words. Then the man in the black robe and others flashed out of the hall. The ninth princess was going to leave as well. However, she stopped when she saw Yi Xian did not intend to leave. "You're not leaving?" Yi Xian glanced at her and said, "You go. I have something to ask her." The ninth princess glanced at Yi Xian. "Be careful." With that, she turned around and left the hall. Earth-ranked martial technique. At the moment when the ninth princess went out, a shocked voice came from the back of the palace. In the blink of an eye, countless sounds of fighting could be heard. Yi Xian paid no attention to what was happening outside, and he walked over to the long-haired woman. She stopped, turned around, glanced at Yi Xian and shook her head slightly. "You're not him." As soon as she finished speaking, she continued carving the wood in front of her. Yi Xian opened his right hand, and the firmament spirit sword appeared in his palm. The long-haired woman stopped. A short while later, she continued carving the wood in front of her. The true essence of this sword has dispersed, and only a trace of its spirit remains. Is he dead? Yi Xian fell silent. At this moment, he was sure that the sword master on the first level of the pagoda of purgatory was the person who had carved the statue of this long-haired woman. Meanwhile, the firmament spirit sword suddenly trembled slightly, and then it descended in front of the long-haired woman. The long-haired woman's hand stiffened in midair. After a very long time, she put down the sculpture in her hand and took the firmament spirit sword lightly. As she gazed at it, she suddenly smiled. However, as she smiled, 2 streams of clear liquid dripped onto the firmament spirit sword. Yi Xian was silent, not knowing what to say. After a while, the long-haired woman said softly, "This sword was forged by me for him back then." Yi Xian looked at the long-haired woman. The long-haired woman gently stroked the firmament spirit sword. "That year he told me to wait for him here and that he would definitely come back. I waited and waited until my hair turned white, but he still did not come back. It's good that he did not come back. In the end there was a thought, and now this thought is gone." As she said that, she turned to look at Yi Xian. "Are you his disciple?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "You can say that." The long-haired woman slowly stood up. She tidied up her clothes and hair and then looked at Yi Xian. "Although he did not give me any status. Strictly speaking, I am not his wife, but are you willing to call me mistress?" Yi Xian was silent for a moment and then he bowed deeply. "Mistress." The long-haired woman smiled. However, there were tears in her eyes. She gently stroked Yi Xian's cheeks. "You are the same as him back then, a handsome young man and also a swordsman. In the future, if there is someone you like, don't let him down." Yi Xian thought for a moment and then said, "Mistress, after waiting for so many years, have you ever regretted it?" The long-haired woman shook her head and smiled. "If you really like someone, even if you give up everything for him and there is no result, you will not regret it. Yi Xian was silent. The long-haired woman turned and swept her gaze over the wooden figures, her eyes rippling as if she was recalling the past. After a moment she gently stroked a wooden statue in front of her. Actually, I know he should have forgotten me. Otherwise, with his strength he would not have been here for more than 4 hours, no matter where he is in the firmament world. But it's all right, I will remember him. As she said that, she suddenly opened her right palm. In the next moment, the black sword floating above the palace directly turned into a black sword light and entered the palace. The black sword landed steadily in the long-haired woman's palm. The long-haired woman turned to look at Yi Xian. This sword is called the Nether Spirit Sword. Because I did not nurture it, it fell from a real sword to a spiritual sword. This sword is a pair with the Nether Spirit Sword. The two swords can be combined or separated. If they are combined, the two swords can be combined into one, and the limit is the heavenly sword, which is above the real sword. The swords need to be nurtured by yourself, and you need to constantly deepen the compatibility between you and them. In the future, how much they can grow will depend on you. As she said that, she handed the Nether Spirit Sword and the Nether Spirit Sword to Yi Xian. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and then took the two swords. Holding the two swords, he immediately felt some kind of connection between them. The long-haired woman smiled. Let's go. Yi Xian looked at the long-haired woman. Mistress, will you go with me? The long-haired woman shook her head. I got to know him here and it should end here. As she said that, she gently rubbed Yi Xian's head. In the future, if you have someone you like, you must remember to not break your promise. Yi Xian did not try to persuade her. He bowed deeply to the long-haired woman and then turned to leave the palace. Within the palace, the long-haired woman turned to look at the statue in front of her. She gently hugged the wooden statue and then leaned her head on its shoulder. She slowly closed her eyes and did not open them again. Outside the palace, Yi Xian turned and bowed again. He felt quite complicated. Wait. He did not know how long the woman in the palace had waited for the sword master, but he was certain that she had waited for a very, very long time. Had the sword master been delayed by something, or had he really forgotten about the woman in the palace? He did not want to think too much about it. At this moment, there were sounds of fighting coming from the back of the palace. Yi Xian was shocked. He quickly kept his two swords and then ran to the back of the palace. At this moment, there were many people gathered at the back of the palace. Obviously, the fight here had attracted people from other places. Yi Xian looked around. Suddenly, a figure landed in front of him. It was the 9th princess. Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, the 9th princess pulled his arm and ran out. Don't let them escape. That earth upper grade martial skill is in that woman's hands. Behind them, Yi Xian heard someone shouting angrily. Then he felt a few people attacking them from behind. At the same time, a man and a woman suddenly appeared in front of them. These two people were the man and woman who had appeared at the beginning. The man looked at the 9th princess coldly. Leave it behind. The 9th princess grinned. Come and get it. The man's right foot touched the ground lightly. The ground cracked in an instant. At the same time, he turned into a shadow and charged at the 9th princess. The corners of the 9th princess' mouth curled up into a ferocious smile. She held the golden saber in her right hand and slashed forward. Swish. A golden saber radiance flashed. Bang. Along with an explosion, the 9th princess and the man retreated rapidly. At this moment, some people ran over and surrounded Yi Xian and the 9th princess. The 9th princess' face sank when she saw this. An earth upper grade martial skill. Its value was unimaginable. After all, there might not be more than 10 earth upper grade martial skills in the entire Jiang country. Even the Jiang country's royal family did not have an earth upper grade martial skill. Only ancient forces like the Drunken Immortal Inn and Kuraki Academy might have one. Naturally, the 9th princess would not give up such a precious martial skill so easily. Opposite Yi Xian and the 9th princess, the man stared at the 9th princess. Leave the martial skill and you can leave. The people in the surroundings stared at the 9th princess. Obviously, they were afraid of the 9th princess' strength and didn't dare attack rashly. The 9th princess who stood by Yi Xian's side turned to glance at him. What do you think? What do I think? Yi Xian asked softly. How much can that earth upper grade martial skill be sold for? The 9th princess thought for a moment and said, at least 50 million gold coins. Moreover, there's no market for it. 50 million. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched and he turned to glance at the ninth princess. What else can I think? Of course I'll fight to the death. As soon as he finished speaking, he clenched his fists tightly, and a strand of terrifying battle intent swept out from within him. Subsequently, he charged towards the man nearby as if he was on steroids. Chapter 56. Needless to say, after Yi Xian released his battle intent, the imposing aura and pressure he emanated were extremely terrifying. Battle intent. In the Azure Prefecture, anyone who could comprehend intent could be considered as a monstrous genius. When Yi Xian arrived a few meters away from the man, he suddenly smashed his fist towards the man. Fist crush. This punch contained both aura and intent. As soon as he punched out, the sound of air exploding resounded. The man's eyes narrowed slightly as he stood before Yi Xian. He didn't dare act carelessly, and he suddenly clenched his right fist and smashed it towards the ground. Bang! The ground exploded apart and countless rocks shot into the sky like sharp arrows that enveloped Yi Xian. Bang! Countless rocks were directly transformed into powder, and then Yi Xian appeared before the man and smashed his fist down. Simple, direct, and violent. The fist hadn't even arrived, but its aura caused the ground behind the man to crack apart. The man's pupils constricted slightly. He didn't take Yi Xian's punch head-on. Instead, he stomped his right foot on the ground and retreated by over 30 meters, increasing the distance between him and Yi Xian. Yi Xian didn't attack again, and he retreated to the ninth princess's side instead. He glanced coldly at the surroundings, and the battle intent within him surged out like tide water. Who else? Everyone looked at Yi Xian with extremely solemn expressions. The man and woman in the distance had solemn expressions in their eyes as well. Especially the man. After he fought Yi Xian just now, the strength of Yi Xian's fist had exceeded his expectations. The ninth princess glanced at Yi Xian and she was in high spirits. Kill them. As she spoke, she drew her golden saber. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly grabbed her arm and ran. He ran extremely quickly and he was over 100 meters away in the blink of an eye. On the spot, everyone was dumbfounded. Ran away? Didn't they want to fight? Everyone looked at each other and it took them a few breaths of time to recover from their shock. We've been fooled. Someone shouted in anger. Soon a group of people went after Yi Xian and the ninth princess in the distance again. Among them, the man and woman were the fastest, taking the lead. Yi Xian pulled the ninth princess along as he ran. His speed was relatively fast. After all, he had a strong physique. While running, the ninth princess suddenly asked, "Aren't we going to fight?" Yi Xian rolled his eyes. "There are so many of them. We can't beat them." "So you're saying that you were just pretending to be powerful?" Yi Xian said with a straight face. "This is called a strategic retreat." The ninth princess smirked. "What a strategic retreat. But can you let go of my hand?" Hearing this, Yi Xian blushed and quickly let go of the ninth princess' arm. Both of them were extremely swift, and it didn't take long for them to escape from the exit. However, their expressions changed drastically the moment they stepped out of the exit. Then, a shadow appeared on the left of the ninth princess like a ghost, and a cold ray of light slashed towards the ninth princess' chest. The cold radiance was as fast as lightning. At this critical moment, Yi Xian was shocked. He instinctively pulled the ninth princess and used his body to collide with the cold radiance. Swoosh! Bang! A figure was directly knocked away by Yi Xian's body. However, blood splattered from Yi Xian's chest. The ninth princess glanced at the wound on Yi Xian's chest and was stunned. Yi Xian did not care about the wound on his chest. He glanced coldly at the person opposite him. He knew the person who attacked him. It was the black-robed man in front of the palace. The black-robed man looked at Yi Xian and grinned hideously. A hero saving a damsel in distress? At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly charged at the black-robed man. Swoosh! The sound of air being torn apart resounded. It was the sound of flesh tearing through the air. The black-robed man's expression grew even more ferocious when he saw Yi Xian charge at him. Suddenly, he raised his hands that were hidden in his sleeves. Swish! Swish! 2 rays of black light shot out. They were 2 fine arrows. Yi Xian did not dodge and allowed the arrows to pierce his chest. The arrows pierced around an inch into Yi Xian's body before they stopped. The black-robed man's expression changed drastically when he witnessed this scene. and he'd forgotten about his next move. Because he hadn't expected that Yi Xian would not dodge at all. Meanwhile, Yi Xian smashed his fist towards him. Yi Xian had used all his strength in this punch. The black-robed man's black robe was torn apart by the aura it emanated. The black-robed man's expression changed drastically. It was too late for him to dodge at this moment, so he could only raise his arms to block Yi Xian's fist. Bang! Crack! The black-robed man's arms were directly fractured by Yi Xian's punch, and the black-robed man himself was sent flying into a mountain wall more than 100 feet away. The black-robed man was just about to get up when Yi Xian appeared in front of him. The black-robed man was horrified and he hurriedly said, "I'm a prince of the Ning kingdom." "If you..." Right at this moment Yi Xian spoke coldly, "A prince of the Ning kingdom? I don't know you." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly kicked the black-robed man's head. Bang! The black-robed man's head flew into the air and blood sprayed out like a fountain. Yi Xian grabbed the pouch on the black-robed man's waist, and then he retreated to the ninth princess side. Meanwhile, the man and woman from before had caught up to them. Yi Xian didn't hesitate at all, and he pulled the ninth princess along as he turned around and ran. The man and woman didn't give up, and they chased after Yi Xian and the ninth princess. Moreover, there were another 5 or 6 people behind them. Yi Xian and the ninth princess ran madly all along the way, and fresh blood flowed ceaselessly from Yi Xian's chest. Even though his body was strong, it wasn't invincible. The black-robed man's cultivation was at least at the ascendant realm, and it was already extremely terrifying that he was able to resist the man's full-force attack with his body. If an ordinary person was hit by that attack, their body would have been split into 2. They hadn't run for long when Yi Xian and the ninth princess stopped once more. A woman was standing not too far away from them. Beichen. Both Yi Xian and the ninth princess' faces sank when they saw Beichen. Beichen glanced at the ninth princess and Yi Xian, and then she didn't waste her breath. A moment later her entire body suddenly became illusory. Yi Xian was about to attack when he witnessed this scene. However, the ninth princess pulled him behind her, and then she took a swift step forward and drew her saber. Wind rend. As soon as her saber descended, a strand of light flashed. A sharp and ear-piercing sound resounded, and it was the sound of the saber energy tearing through the air. Moreover, a strand of green light enveloped the saber energy in front of the ninth princess. A moment of silence ensued. Bang! An invisible wave of energy suddenly erupted. The ninth princess retreated to Yi Xian's side while Beichen stopped around 10 m away from Yi Xian and the ninth princess. Moreover, countless bottomless rifts had appeared on the ground between them. Beichen sized up the ninth princess. "Everyone says that you're a genius commander, but I never imagined that your saber technique would be so sharp as well. How surprising." The ninth princess glanced at Beichen. "You've obtained something else. After all, greed can kill you." Beichen chuckled. "I'm very tempted by a high-grade earth-rank martial technique." Meanwhile, the people behind Yi Xian and the ninth princess had caught up to them. At this moment Yi Xian and the ninth princess' faces had turned completely gloomy. The ninth princess glanced at Yi Xian and asked, "What do you think?" Yi Xian glanced at Beichen and the man and woman who stood not too far away from him. He thought for a moment and said, "I think that all of us can sit down and have a chat. I'm very willing to communicate with all of you." As he spoke he glanced at Beichen and the others. "What do all of you think?" All of them were speechless. The ninth princess glanced at Yi Xian, and then she gave him a thumbs up. "I'm impressed." Beichen sized up Yi Xian. "I think there might be something wrong with your head." Yi Xian was speechless. Meanwhile, Beichen walked slowly towards Yi Xian and the ninth princess, and the others behind Yi Xian and the ninth princess were walking towards them as well. Obviously, Beichen, the man, the woman, and the others had come to an agreement to deal with the 2 of them first. Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly, and the divine firmament sword within him started to tremble. Right at this moment the ninth princess suddenly soared into the sky. Everyone watched as she drew the golden saber from her waist, and then she held it with both hands. After that, strands of golden energy and saber intent swept out incessantly from within her. Bang! A strand of monstrous pressure appeared out of thin air. Even Yi Xian's expression changed when this pressure appeared because it was truly too strong, and it almost pressed him to the ground. Fortunately, after he released his battle intent he felt much better. An earth-rank martial technique. Suddenly, Bei Chen's eyes narrowed slightly. You're only at the Ascension realm, yet you actually dared to execute an Earth-rank martial technique. As she spoke, she started to move backwards slowly. An Earth-rank martial technique. The expressions of everyone in the surroundings changed when they heard this. Such a martial technique could be said to contain some of the might of the heavens and the earth. All of them started to move backwards. Right at this moment, the ninth princess suddenly flashed down from midair. In the next moment, numerous afterimages flashed through the surroundings. At the same time, countless rays of golden light erupted like scorching suns. Bei Chen's pupils constricted when the ninth princess descended to the ground. She pressed her palm forward lightly, and then a strand of terrifying green energy suddenly erupted from the center of her palm. However, the green energy had just come into contact with the golden rays of light and instantly exploded apart. Bei Chen's expression changed drastically when she witnessed this scene, and she retreated like a madman. At the same time, she attacked repeatedly to ceaselessly resist the golden rays of light that were descending towards her. On the other side, the man and woman were retreating repeatedly as well. While the others by their side were retreating as well, they weren't as swift as them. Moreover, two of them were even slashed into two at the waist by the golden rays of light. At this moment, the ground had even started to crack apart. For a time, the ninth princess was invincible. Xian was flabbergasted by this scene. A few breaths of time passed before the ninth princess suddenly appeared in front of him, and Xian spoke with slight excitement. Amazing. Truly amazing. Come. Another one. Kill them. The ninth princess glanced at Xian, and then her body slumped down into Xian's arms. She rested her head on Xian's shoulder. I can't. Big brother, can we make a strategic retreat for now? Xian was speechless. P.S. It's Lidong, so remember to get some clothes. Chapter 57. Run. Xian was not stupid. He knew that the ninth princess must have suffered a backlash when she used the Earth-rank martial skill. Without thinking too much, Xian grabbed the ninth princess by the waist and carried her on his back. Then he turned around and ran. Around 15 minutes later, the battlefield gradually returned to its original state of tranquility. Bei Chen looked at her right hand. There were a few bloody scratches on it. After a moment of silence, she suddenly tapped the ground with the tip of her foot and floated toward the place where Xian and the ninth princess had disappeared. On the other side, the man, woman, and two other people also hurriedly chased after them. They could naturally see that the ninth princess had suffered a backlash after using the Earth-rank martial skill. At this moment she was at her weakest, so they naturally would not let go of this opportunity. A high-grade Earth-rank martial skill. This martial skill could be used as a family heirloom for many families and factions. Not only that, but with this high-grade Earth-rank martial skill, it could completely increase the strength of a faction by a large margin. At the same cultivation level, most of the time, it was a battle of martial skills and treasures. Apart from Bei Chen and the others, after Xian and the ninth princess ran away, some other people heard the commotion and chased after them. Xian carried the ninth princess on his back and ran wildly. He did not run in the direction of Two World City, but in the boundless mountain range. After some time, Xian arrived at a natural waterfall with the ninth princess on his back. The waterfall was dozens of feet wide and the water was very rapid. After a moment of silence, Xian put the ninth princess on the ground gently. Then he took off his shoes and ran in the other direction on the tip of his toes. About a while later he ran back. When he came back he also walked on the tip of his toes. Therefore there were no footprints behind him. He looked around, then carried the ninth princess and ran toward a natural pit at the edge of the waterfall. The pit was at the edge of the waterfall. If one looked from the front, it would be difficult to see the location of the pit because of the waterfall. Xian carried the ninth princess and hid in the pit. The pit was not big and could fit two people. After about a quarter of an hour, Xian heard the sound of wind breaking outside. Xian felt a chill in his heart as he put on a vigilant expression. The Lingxiao sword in his body was already accumulating power, ready to strike at any moment. At this moment the person outside had already turned around and left. Upon seeing this, Xian immediately heaved a sigh of relief. He lowered his head and looked at the ninth princess in his arms. At this moment, the ninth princess's face was pale and there were traces of blood at the corner of her mouth. She looked extremely weak. At this moment she had no combat ability at all. Yi Xian sighed in a low voice. This woman was really putting her life on the line for that high-grade Earth-rank martial skill. You're very smart. At this moment the ninth princess suddenly opened her eyes. He didn't run towards Two World City. Yi Xian shook his head. How would he dare to run to Two World City? Everyone knew that it was the ninth princess's base camp. If he ran there he would definitely die. The ninth princess suddenly said, I need to rest for 2 days. 2 days. Yi Xian's heart instantly sank. It would be fine if he wasn't discovered in 2 days. But once he was discovered then he would be in big trouble. After a while the atmosphere suddenly became slightly awkward. Because Yi Xian carried the ninth princess in and was drenched by the waterfall, the ninth princess was completely drenched at this moment. Moreover, she was wearing a silk dress, so the water made her dress stick tightly to her body. As a result, the originally protruding part became even more protruding. Moreover, the ninth princess was in Yi Xian's arms, and her protruding part just happened to be against a certain part of him. This made Yi Xian feel extremely awkward. Yi Xian wanted to move a little and move away, but this movement was even more terrible. That soft protruding part was against a certain part of him. As soon as he moved and the two of them came into contact, a certain part of him instantly reacted violently. The atmosphere became even more awkward. The ninth princess just stared at Yi Xian, causing Yi Xian's scalp to go numb. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Sorry, I didn't mean to be frivolous. In all fairness, he did not mean to be frivolous, but this was a human's instinct and most of the time he could not control it. Although he was a swordsman was also a human. Moreover, he was a man, especially a man who had basically never been in contact with a woman. This was the first time he was so close to a woman, so it was normal for some parts of him to have some primitive impulses. It would be abnormal if he did not have any impulses. The ninth princess slowly closed her eyes. She did not speak, nor did she have anything to say. Just like that, the two of them maintained that position for nearly an hour. When the sky turned dark, Yi Xian carried the ninth princess out of the small pit. He still did not run towards Two World City, but instead he ran towards Sword Master's cave abode. The most dangerous place was often the safest place. Although it was pitch black, Yi Xian had no trouble running while carrying the ninth princess. After all, he spent most of his time in Green City in the mountains. After about half an hour, Yi Xian carried the ninth princess back to the underground palace. Instead of entering the palace, Yi Xian carried the ninth princess to a small bamboo house at the back of the palace. At this time the bamboo house had been ransacked, leaving only a few simple tables, chairs and beds. Yi Xian gently placed the ninth princess on the bamboo bed, took off his robe and covered her body. Have a good rest, I'll guard outside. After saying that, he turned around and left the bamboo house. The ninth princess glanced at Yi Xian's back without saying a word. Outside the bamboo house, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground and took out a figurine. The figurine was a little girl who looked 70 to 80% similar to Yi Ling. This was the figurine that he had carved himself. In fact, there was another figurine which was himself. However, it was in Yi Ling's hands. A faint smile appeared on Yi Xian's face as he looked at the figurine in his hands. As though he had thought of something, he took out another figurine. This figurine looked very similar to Xianxia. Looking at the two figurines in his hands, Yi Xian's smile became even more radiant. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly lifted his head. Not far from him, a man was walking towards him. This person was the man with hair that resembled a chicken's nest. He was dressed in plain clothes and carried an eye-catching black axe on his back. Yi Xian stood up. The man stopped not far away from Yi Xian. He glanced at the small bamboo house and then walked towards it. Yi Xian stood in front of the man. The man did not waste any time and threw a punch. When the punch was thrown, a terrifying force gushed out like a river bursting through a dam. Crack! The blue stone floorboards around them cracked into powder at this moment. Yi Xian was expressionless as he threw a punch as well. Fist collapse. With this punch, a wave of fist aura and battle intent surged out from his fist. Boom! With a deafening explosion, the man and Yi Xian retreated rapidly. Yi Xian retreated to the door of the bamboo house while the man retreated 60 to 70 feet. The ground in front of them was already a mess. The man glanced at Yi Xian. Battle intent. Fist aura. Quasi-martial Dao master. Yi Xian slowly clenched his fist. In an instant, A wave of fist aura enveloped the man not far away. I'm not confident that I can kill you, but I'm confident that I can cripple you. If you attack, you'll die in someone else's hands even if you obtain that superior grade earth rank martial technique. Cripple me? The man removed the enormous axe from his back. I want to give it a try. Right at this moment Zhou Xian suddenly opened his palm. In the next moment, a sword appeared at the center of his palm, and in the blink of an eye numerous rays of light surged out incessantly from Ling Xiao's sword. A single strike to decide life and death. In the distance, the man's eyes narrowed slightly, and a serious expression appeared in his eyes for the first time. Zhou Xian grinned as he gazed at the man with his sword in hand. Come and give it a try. All of a sudden the man grabbed the giant axe and threw it at Zhou Xian. Hiss. The enormous axe tore through the sky and a long white streak appeared in the sky. The formidable force contained within the enormous axe even caused the ground and the surroundings to shatter incessantly. At this moment Zhou Xian also drew his sword out. A ray of light flashed through the battlefield. A single strike to decide life and death. In next to no time the sword stabbed the enormous axe. Bang! The enormous axe shook violently, and then traces of cracks appeared on it in the blink of an eye. At the same time the enormous axe was blasted flying. The man stretched out his right hand and grabbed the enormous axe. Bang! The man, along with his axe, retreated a full 100 feet. The man glanced at his right hand, and the space between his thumb and forefinger had split open while blood was seeping out incessantly. The man raised his head to gaze at Zhou Xian who stood in the distance. Master swordsman. Battle intent and dual cultivation in the sword and martial arts. Zhou Xian pondered deeply for a moment and said, How about you do me a favor? Favor. The man's eyes narrowed slightly and he gazed at Zhou Xian for a long time. In the end he put the enormous axe away and said, The profound sect of the Great Cloud Empire, sworn swordsman, remember that you owe me a favor. As soon as he finished speaking he turned around and left. Zhou Xian was stunned when he saw the man called Sworn leave. Did that fellow really do me a favor? I was just trying to buy time. In fact, Zhou Xian was not aware of Dao Yi's influence as a swordsman. Countless forces would want to rope in a quasi-sword Dao Grandmaster. For some individuals having a quasi-sword Dao Grandmaster as a friend would bring them endless benefits. Most of the time friends were extremely important when one was out in the world. As for Zhou Xian, not only was he a quasi-sword Dao Grandmaster, but he was also a quasi-martial Dao Grandmaster. His influence was on par with an earth-level martial arts technique. Most importantly, Swen was not fully confident that he could defeat Zhou Xian. Moreover, if he chose to fight, it would only result in a lose-lose situation. Therefore he decisively gave up on the earth-level martial arts technique and befriended Zhou Xian. Swen left without any hesitation and disappeared from Zhou Xian's sight in the blink of an eye. Seeing that Swen had left, Zhou Xian touched his chin and said softly, So I'm quite influential. It seems that I've seriously underestimated my charm. At that moment he suddenly raised his head and looked not far away. There a woman was slowly walking toward him. Seeing the woman, Zhou Xian's face sank. Beichen. It's this woman again. Beichen sized up Zhou Xian. The most dangerous place is the safest place. That's not a bad idea. Unfortunately, you've underestimated the charm of an earth-level martial arts technique. Some of the higher-ups are already green with envy. Zhou Xian held his sword and walked toward Beichen. How about you do me a favor? The favor? Beichen chuckled. Are you still dreaming? Chapter 58. Beichen walked slowly towards Zhou Xian, and a ray of green light flickered in her right palm. She naturally wouldn't underestimate Zhou Xian. Or it should be said that she wouldn't underestimate anyone now that she was here. She would fight with all her might no matter who it was. Zhou Xian was quite depressed as he watched Beichen walk over. Why doesn't this fellow know what's good for him? He didn't think too much about it and he suddenly floated forward with his sword in hand. Since we can't make peace, then we'll fight. That was Zhou Xian's attitude. The corners of Beichen's mouth curled up slightly when she saw Zhou Xian attack, and then her body suddenly became ethereal. In the next moment an afterimage flashed by. Bang! An explosion resounded in the blink of an eye, and then Zhou Xian retreated to the entrance of the bamboo house. However, Beichen didn't move at all. Yi Xian tightened his grip on Ling Xiao's sword with his right hand while a wisp of a solemn expression appeared in his eyes. She's extraordinarily strong. There was a trace of seriousness in Bei Chen's eyes as well as she stood before Yi Xian. An expert's ability was obvious as soon as they attacked. Her battle with Yi Xian allowed her to have a rough understanding of Yi Xian's strength. Bei Chen was about to attack again when the ninth princess suddenly walked out from the bamboo house. Bei Chen stopped moving while Yi Xian was stunned. The ninth princess walked over to Yi Xian's side, and then she gazed coldly at Bei Chen. Do you want to fight too by yourself? As soon as she finished speaking, she placed her right hand on the golden saber on her waist. The golden saber trembled slightly and then a ray of light flashed out. Bei Chen smiled faintly. You executed an earth-ranked martial technique with your ascending realm cultivation. Your body will definitely suffer a backlash. You will need at least 2 days to recover from this backlash. Right now, you are merely using your connections to intimidate others. As soon as she finished speaking, her figure floated towards the ninth princess and Yi Xian. She was very decisive. Yi Xian tapped the ground lightly with the tip of his foot when he saw Bei Chen attack, and then his figure shot forward swiftly. However, this attack was directly stopped by Bei Chen's palm, and there was a faint green glow at the center of her palm. At this moment, Yi Xian lightly slid his sword. The sword slid at a strange angle, aiming for Bei Chen's wrist. However, Bei Chen's reflexes were faster. She retracted her hand and dodged the attack. But in the next moment, Yi Xian slashed at Bei Chen with a diagonal slash. On the blade of the sword light flashed. Bei Chen Chao took a step back and was just able to dodge the attack. Right at this moment, a golden saber suddenly slashed down from above her head. Bei Chen's pupils constricted and she slammed her hands down. Boom! A green light swept out from her body. Bang! As the golden saber light fell, the green light instantly shattered. But Bei Chen had already retreated 100 feet behind him. Bei Chen stared fixedly at the ninth princess in the distance. How dare you attack me? The ninth princess laughed coldly. I'm a disciple of the imperial family after all. Don't I have some special methods to protect myself? Bei Chen frowned when she heard this. But it didn't take long for her brows to relax and she smiled. Is that so? Then let me see how many more attacks you can make. As soon as she finished speaking, she was about to attack again. But at this moment, the ninth princess suddenly leaped up into the air, and her right hand tightly gripped the golden saber at her waist. In the next moment, a monstrous pressure swept out from her body. An earth-rank martial technique. Bei Chen's pupils constricted when she saw this. A moment later, she turned around and flashed a few times before vanishing in front of Yi Xian and the ninth princess. Obviously, she didn't want to go head-on against the ninth princess's earth-rank martial technique. Although she wasn't very afraid if she and the ninth princess were to fight and both of them were injured, then it would only benefit others. Many people were waiting to reap the benefits. The ninth princess stopped in midair when she saw Bei Chen retreat, and she landed firmly beside Yi Xian. Go in. Yi Xian nodded and then he followed the ninth princess into the bamboo house. As soon as they entered the house, the ninth princess fell backwards. Yi Xian was shocked and he hurriedly supported her. At this moment, blood was flowing incessantly from the corner of the ninth princess's mouth. Yi Xian hurriedly carried the ninth princess to the bed. As he looked at the ninth princess who was still bleeding, Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Is an earth-rank martial technique really more important than your life?" The ninth princess shook her head. "You don't understand," Yi Xian said in a low voice. "I only know that you'll die if this goes on." The ninth princess looked at Yi Xian. "Do you know what kind of situation the kingdom of Jiang is in right now?" Yi Xian was silent. The ninth princess slowly closed her eyes. In the country there are many aristocratic families. These aristocratic families have their own camps, and their children only know about the family, not the country. Above the aristocratic families, there are the two behemoths, the Drunken Immortal Building and the Kuraki Academy. These two behemoths do not hesitate to recruit talents from the country, and those who join these two forces, how many of them are willing to fight for the country? At this point she opened her eyes and looked at Yi Xian. "Do you know why the kingdom of Jiang doesn't dare to go to war with the Tang Empire? It's because we can't unite the country. Once the war starts, we can't mobilize those people." And once the kingdom of Jiang is destroyed, yes, the children of the Kuraki Academy and the aristocratic families will be fine, but what about the ordinary people? Will the Kuraki Academy, the aristocratic families, and the drunken immortal building be willing to protect those ordinary people? Yi Xian sighed and was about to speak, but the ninth princess continued. Most of the profitable industries in the country are in the hands of the drunken immortal building. They almost monopolize all industries, so the national treasury is in a state of loss all year round. With this earth-level upper-grade martial skill, as long as it is auctioned, it can maintain the national treasury for at least 3 years. At this point she shook her head slightly and said, I have tens of thousands of soldiers under my command, and they haven't received their pay for 2 months. Yi Xian glanced at the ninth princess. Is that why you came here? The ninth princess said indifferently, what else? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, I know you have your difficulties, but have you ever thought that there is hope for everything as long as people are alive? People are dead, everything is nonsense. As he spoke, he glanced outside the bamboo house. That woman definitely hasn't left. Not only has she not left, but there are definitely more people coming here. Furthermore, that woman just said that some of the big shots above were envious of this earth-ranked martial technique. In this case, whoever takes this earth-level upper-grade martial skill will be targeted. The ninth princess closed her eyes slowly. You can leave now. Yi Xian frowned and kept silent for a long time. In the end, his expression turned cold and he looked at the ninth princess. Take out that earth-level upper-grade martial skill. Hearing this, the ninth princess opened her eyes and looked at Yi Xian with a trace of disbelief. Yi Xian's expression turned even colder. Hand it over. The ninth princess looked at Yi Xian for a long time. In the end she laughed at herself. Looks like I underestimated the charm of an earth-level martial skill. However, I never expected that both of us would misjudge it. As soon as she finished speaking, her jade-like fingers moved slightly. Soon, a black scroll fell in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian glanced at the black scroll. It was extremely smooth and he didn't know what material it was made of. He opened it and saw a few large words. Earth-level upper-grade finger of nirvana. Without looking at it any further, Yi Xian kept the scroll and walked out of the bamboo house. The ninth princess looked at Yi Xian coldly and didn't say a word. After a while she took out a black stone. She held the black stone in her hand and a strand of celestial qi flowed into it. Then she slowly closed her eyes. Shaoan, this person can't be trusted. In a mountain range 1,000 miles away, a woman in a snow-white robe stopped. She took out a pitch-black stone and stared at it for a long time. Then she suddenly turned around. Miss? You have an appointment with the demon marshal. Someone shouted from behind. However, the woman in white didn't even turn around. After Yi Xian left the bamboo house, he jumped a few times and arrived above the palace. He looked around and then looked at the scroll in his hand and laughed. I finally got it. As soon as he finished speaking, his figure flashed and floated down into the distance. It's that earth-level martial skill. Someone said in the darkness, and it didn't take long for numerous afterimages to chase after Yi Xian. The person in the lead was Bei Chen. Besides Bei Chen, there was also the man and woman from before. Both of them were extremely strong and even Bei Chen was extremely fearful of them. Yi Xian was extremely swift, and he charged out of the sword master's abode in the blink of an eye. After that he fled deep into the forest while a group of people were chasing after him madly. As for the ninth princess, no one paid any attention to her anymore. Everyone's gazes were on Yi Xian because the earth-level martial skill was in Yi Xian's possession. Yi Xian ran madly all the way and he specifically went through dense forests and complicated terrain. That was why Bei Chen and the others didn't catch up to him at the first possible moment. Moreover, he used the complicated terrain to put some distance between himself and Bei Chen and the others. However, Bei Chen and the others clearly had no intention of giving up, and they pursued him madly all the way. On the other hand, Yi Xian was like an agile monkey that ceaselessly jumped about in the boundless mountain range. He didn't fight, and his first reaction upon encountering others was to run. Just like that, he ran and night had finally arrived. Yi Xian smiled when night descended. It was so dark that one couldn't even see their own fingers. However, it wasn't difficult for Yi Xian at all because he was already used to such nights in the mountains. On the other hand, Bei Chen and the others had slightly solemn expressions on their faces. Even though most of them had tempered themselves in the mountain range, they hadn't fought and killed practically all year round like Zhou Xian. So when night descended, Bei Chen and the others were slightly apprehensive. This apprehension wasn't just because of Zhou Xian, it was also because of the apprehension they had towards each other. One had to know that backstabbing was a common occurrence in the outside world. In the night, Zhou Xian hid in a dense old tree. He took out a small person that looked like Yiling and smiled. "I'll be back soon. I'm afraid you won't be able to go back." At this moment, a voice suddenly rang out from the side. Zhou Xian narrowed his eyes. He suddenly turned his head and saw a woman standing not far below him on his right. It was Bei Chen. Not only Bei Chen, but there was also a man and a woman on his left. Zhou Xian's expression darkened. "How did you find me?" The corners of Bei Chen's mouth curled up. "Because there's someone above us, but there doesn't seem to be anyone above you. So, do you understand?" Zhou Xian was about to speak, but at this moment there was a sudden change. Flap. With a crisp sound of a slap, Bei Chen's entire body was sent flying more than 30 meters away. When she stood up, there was a red claw mark on the right side of her face. "Everyone." Zhou Xian was also stunned. Soon he said seriously, "Actually, there's someone above me too. Bei Chen and the others." Chapter 59. To Zhou Xian's left, the man and woman became alert and took a few steps back. The two of them hadn't seen how Bei Chen had been beaten up. To be able to send Bei Chen flying under their noses without anyone noticing, this kind of person was definitely not someone they could fight against. On the other side, Bei Chen's expression turned ugly. She didn't even know how she had been sent flying. Who did it? She glanced around coldly, but there was no one around. In the end, she looked at Zhou Xian, who was not far away. Zhou Xian tidied up his clothes, looking fearless. "Do you think you're the only ones with people above you?" At this point he raised a finger and shook it gently. "No, actually, I have people above me too. Who doesn't have a backer in the underworld?" Slap. At this moment there was a crisp slap and a figure was sent flying. It wasn't Bei Chen who was sent flying but Zhou Xian. Bei Chen and the other two were dumbfounded. Zhou Xian was also dumbfounded. *CK, this guy hits anyone he doesn't like. But can't he do it when there's no one around? How can he get out of this situation now? Zhou Xian slowly got up. There was also a small claw mark on the right side of his face. The atmosphere was a little strange. Zhou Xian coughed and said, "We're all out here looking for opportunities. Everyone should sit down and talk, right?" Nearby, Bei Chen chuckled. "Is that what you're thinking?" Zhou Xian said seriously, "I didn't expect us to be thinking the same thing." In the distance, Bei Chen shook her head and interrupted Zhou Xian. "I thought there was something wrong with your head, but now it seems that I wasn't wrong." "Your head really isn't." Her voice came to an abrupt halt. Because Zhou Xian, who wasn't far from her, had turned around and fled. He was extremely fast and disappeared into the night in the blink of an eye. Bei Chen's expression turned extremely ugly. Not far away, the man in the ink-white robe looked at Bei Chen coldly. He talked too much. After that, he and the woman beside him turned around and chased after Zhou Xian in the distance. Bei Chen's eyes narrowed slightly, and a ferocious smile appeared on the corners of her mouth. In the next moment, her figure floated forward and everywhere she went was a mess. In the darkness of the night, Zhou Xian sprinted all the way with a solemn expression. Because he'd obtained a piece of information from Bei Chen's words. The reason his whereabouts had been exposed was because someone above him had been leaking information to Bei Chen and the others. Someone was breaking the rules of the game. The reason he dared to break the rules of the game was undoubtedly because he had no one behind him. If it was in Xianxia, then those big shots would definitely not dare to do this. The reason why those big shots dared to do this was without a doubt because he had no one backing him up. Zhou Xian slowly clenched his right hand. Right now he was facing a very serious problem. No matter how he hid, Bei Chen and the others would find him. But if he didn't flee, then he would definitely be unable to fight Bei Chen and the others on his own. As he ran, Zhou Xian's brows gradually furrowed together. After a while, Zhou Xian seemed to have thought of something and his brows relaxed. He glanced at the surroundings and then he ran towards a small hill in the distance. When he arrived in front of the hill, he rolled on the ground, and at the instant he rolled, he'd stealthily hidden the earth rank martial technique in a pile of leaves. He'd done it very stealthily. Meanwhile, he'd rolled to the other side of the hill and then he ran forward for a while before he stopped. Around 5 breaths of time after he stopped, a white figure flashed over. It was Beichen. Beichen was around 3 to 4 breaths faster than the man and woman. When he saw Beichen, Xian immediately charged towards her. Beichen's lips curled into a cold smile. Her figure trembled and she turned into a blur as she shot towards Xian. When she arrived in front of Xian, she slapped her palm towards Xian's chest. This attack was actually just a test and she hadn't used her full strength. The real killing move was yet to come. However, when Xian arrived in front of her, he didn't make a move, and instead allowed her palm to land on his chest. Bam! Xian's entire body flew backwards like a kite with a broken string. In the end, he crashed into a tree and fell to the ground. Beichen frowned. "What the hell are you doing?" At this moment, the man and woman from before rushed over. When they saw the scene in the middle of the field, they were slightly stunned. Xian suddenly crawled up from the ground. He spat out a mouthful of blood and glared at Beichen. "I've already given you the Earth rank martial skill. Why do you still want to kill me?" Beichen was dumbfounded. The man and woman next to her suddenly turned to look at Beichen. Both of them had unfriendly expressions. Xian was still spitting out blood as he glared at Beichen. "You're so vicious, woman. You said that you'd let me go if I handed over the high-grade Earth rank martial skill. I didn't think that you'd try to silence me just because you were afraid that the secret would be leaked. You're so cruel." Beichen narrowed her eyes and her expression was quite ferocious. "What kind of trick are you playing?" As she spoke, she pointed at the man and woman not far away. "Do you think they'll believe you?" In the distance, the man and woman looked at each other. Soon they both turned to look at Xian. At this moment, Xian suddenly took off his robe. Soon, he was only left with his underwear. When the woman in the ink-white dress saw this, she immediately frowned. Xian pointed at himself. "Do you see this? I don't even have a single hair on me." As he spoke, he pointed at Beichen. "What about you? Do you dare to show everyone the storage ring you're wearing? Do you dare?" Hearing this, the man and woman next to her looked at Beichen. To be more precise, they looked at the ring on Beichen's finger. Beichen glared at Xian. The murderous intent in her eyes was almost tangible. "You're a great swordsman after all. How could you be so shameless? You look so cheap. Are you a lowly cultivator?" As soon as she spoke, a terrifying aura suddenly swept out from her body. This aura directly pressed down on Xian. Xian's eyelids twitched. At this moment, the man and woman in the ink-white robes suddenly made their move. The two of them released their own auras, which instantly shattered Beichen's aura and pressure. When he saw the man and woman make their move, Xian immediately heaved a sigh of relief. On the other side, Beichen glared at the man and woman. "Are you two pigs? How could the two of you believe his nonsense?" The man glanced at Xian, who was still bleeding from the corner of his mouth. "He's a swordsman after all. What he said shouldn't be false." As he spoke, he glanced at the storage ring on Beichen's hand. "Can't you just let go of the storage ring and let us have a look at it?" Hearing this, Beichen's expression instantly turned cold. "Look at the storage ring?" In the world of cultivators, that was a huge taboo. This request could be said to be extremely excessive. Beichen slowly clenched his right hand. When the man and woman saw Beichen clench his right hand, they immediately turned to face her. Both of them had vigilant expressions on their faces, and they were ready to attack at any moment. And at this moment, Xian, who was not far away, suddenly said, "She's waiting for reinforcements from the Kuraki Academy. I just saw her release the Kuraki Academy's distress signal, so there will definitely be students from the Kuraki Academy coming soon. She's just buying time now." Hearing this, the man and woman's expressions instantly turned cold. "Find reinforcements by time." Both of them looked at Beichen, and a mysterious flow of air flowed around them. Beichen glared at Xian. If looks could kill, then Xian would have probably died over 100 times by now. "Kill her." At this moment, Xian suddenly charged at Beichen. When they saw Xian attack, the man and woman hesitated for a moment before charging at Beichen as well. As for Xian, he just collided with Beichen head-on when he was blasted flying again. After that, he didn't attack again. Instead, he rolled a few times to the side, and it didn't take long for him to return to the hill from before. He picked up the Earth rank martial technique that was buried in a pile of leaves, And then he rolled a few more times before vanishing into the distance in the blink of an eye. Meanwhile, the sounds of battle resounded from behind him. Xian dashed madly towards Two World City. Not long after Xian started running, Bei Chen fluttered backwards and put some distance between her and the man and woman. She glanced coldly at them and said, "You two idiots. Ask the person behind you." The man and woman exchanged glances and then they looked up into the sky. After around 10 minutes passed, their expressions turned extremely unsightly. They'd been tricked. The person behind them hadn't been paying attention to Xian at all, so they hadn't been able to notify them immediately. Although only a moment had passed, it was enough for Xian to run far away. Bei Chen turned to look in the direction where Xian had escaped. A swordsman can be so shameless. What an eye-opener. Not far away, the man said coldly, "Don't worry, he can't escape. This Earth-rank upper-level martial technique will be taken by the Ning Kingdom." The Ning Kingdom. Bei Chen glanced at the man, then turned around and left. The Ning Kingdom? The Jiang Kingdom? The Tang Kingdom? To her, none of this meant anything. Because geniuses like her would one day go to a better place. In front of the gates of Two World City, the 9th princess leaned against the city wall with her arms crossed. No one knew what she was thinking. Suddenly, she raised her head and looked into the distance. Not far away, a woman was walking towards her. The newcomer wore clothes as white as snow, spotless. It was Xianxia. Xianxia walked in front of the 9th princess. The 9th princess was about to speak when Xianxia turned to look at the vast mountain range in the distance. "You've wronged him." The 9th princess frowned slightly. Xianxia said again, "He's not that kind of person." The 9th princess said in a deep voice, "That's an Earth-rank upper-level martial technique. No one wouldn't be tempted." Xianxia smiled slightly. "I believe him. P.S. There's no need to strategically slow down today. Don't strategically slow down your tickets. Ask for tickets. Ask for tickets." Chapter 60. I believe him. Xianxia's voice was very soft but firm. The 9th princess leaned against the wall and said indifferently, "Shaoan, let's make a bet?" Xianxia turned to look at the 9th princess. The 9th princess smiled and said, "Let's bet if he's that kind of person. If he is, Shaoan, stay for another year and leave after a year." Xianxia asked, "What if he's not?" The 9th princess smiled and said, "Then I've wronged him. I'm willing to apologize to him personally and give him a golden saber." A golden saber. Xianxia was slightly stunned. The 9th princess's lips curled into a mischievous smile. "Why? Are you jealous?" Xianxia turned to look at the distant mountains. "I usually don't put vinegar when I eat." The 9th princess was speechless. Deep in the mountains, Xian was still running. His current target was Two World City because it was the base camp of the country of Jiang. Once he reached there, those big shots would definitely not dare to break the rules of the game so unscrupulously. Soon he arrived at a dense forest. After passing through this dense forest, he could see Two World City. The corners of Xian's lips curled up and he sped up. At this moment, a middle-aged man appeared in front of him without any warning. Xian stopped. The middle-aged man wore a gorgeous white robe and his long hair draped over his shoulders. His right hand was behind his back as he looked at Xian. "Hand over that thing and I'll spare your life." Xian's face sank. This person in front of him must be one of the big shots. Obviously, the other party was prepared to disregard everything for this Earth-rank martial skill. Xian slowly clenched his right hand. In the distance, the middle-aged man sneered. "You want to fight?" Xian said indifferently, "Even if I give you that thing, you won't let me go. You'll kill me to silence me, won't you?" The middle-aged man chuckled. "You're smart. However, even if you don't hand it over, can't I kill you and take it?" Just as he was about to attack, Xian suddenly laughed. "Do you really think I'll bring that thing with me?" Hearing this, the middle-aged man frowned. "I underestimated your intelligence. But it doesn't matter. After I capture you, I have ways to make you tell me the location of that thing." With that, he took a step forward. He took a step forward and the ground in front of him instantly cracked open. Moreover, the crack rapidly spread to the front of Xian. Xian's expression changed drastically. Not daring to be careless, he punched out. This punch could be said to have used all of his strength. This was because the middle-aged man in front of him was at least at the Nether Passage realm. He naturally did not dare to underestimate such an expert. With a punch, a powerful fist aura and battle intent surged out. Bang! With a muffled sound, Yi Xian's entire body was thrown several hundred feet away. Yi Xian crawled up slowly from the ground, and his entire right arm had been completely blasted apart. The middle-aged man's eyes narrowed slightly. What a formidable physical body. You were actually able to forcefully resist an attack of mine. I underestimated you a little. As soon as he finished speaking, he stomped the ground lightly with his right foot. A fist-sized rock suddenly flew up into the air, and then it shot explosively towards Yi Xian like an arrow that had left the bowstring. It was extremely swift and it directly shattered the air. Yi Xian's pupils constricted slightly as he stood before the middle-aged man. He opened his palm and a sword appeared in his palm. In the next moment, a ray of light flashed. A sword howl resounded. Immediately after, the rock was split into two by the sword radiance. In the blink of an eye, the sword radiance arrived in front of the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man laughed with ridicule and then he flicked his sleeve. Bang! The ray of light instantly exploded apart, and then Yi Xian's figure was blasted over 30 m away. The middle-aged man's eyes narrowed slightly. He really is a dual cultivator of the sword and martial arts. As he spoke, he glanced at the surroundings. Looks like there really isn't anyone behind you. Otherwise, it's impossible that you haven't attacked since the beginning. As soon as he finished speaking, he started walking slowly towards Yi Xian. The reason he hadn't attacked rashly was obviously because he was worried that Yi Xian didn't have anyone behind him. Normally, monstrous geniuses that were able to come to this place definitely had some sort of power behind them. But up until this moment, especially when Yi Xian was in a hopeless situation while there was no movement behind Yi Xian, this allowed him to confirm that it was very likely that Yi Xian was an independent cultivator. Since it was an independent cultivator, then he naturally didn't have any worries. Yi Xian stared fixedly at the middle-aged man from afar. The middle-aged man was growing closer and closer, and Yi Xian suddenly leaped forward when the middle-aged man was just a few meters away from him. Seeing that Yi Xian still wanted to attack, the middle-aged man's lips curled into a mocking smile. Yi Xian was only at the changing Qi realm, which was 2 whole realms lower than him. How could Yi Xian be his match? As he thought of this, he actually began to underestimate Yi Xian. However, this was normal. After all, the difference between their realms was just too great. At this moment, a sword suddenly appeared in Yi Xian's left hand. Yi Xian's hands came together, and the two swords directly merged into one. The moment the two swords merged into one, Yi Xian's arms split open and fresh blood flowed out. The two swords merged into one, and in an instant, it had risen to the level of a bright sword. At this moment, Yi Xian attacked. One sword to decide life and death. This sword had greatly exceeded the strength that Yi Xian should have at this moment. The moment Yi Xian attacked, the middle-aged man's pupils suddenly shrank to the size of a needle. How is this possible? The power of this sword had completely exceeded his expectations. There was no time to think. The middle-aged man's right hand lightly twisted and then shook upwards. In his palm, a vortex of air instantly engulfed Yi Xian's sword. There was a moment of silence. Boom! The vortex of air suddenly shattered, and the middle-aged man was directly pushed back more than 200 feet. The moment he stopped, his entire right sleeve was instantly shredded. At this moment, his entire right arm had cracked into a spider web, and blood continuously flowed out from the tiny cracks. The middle-aged man looked at his arm and then at Yi Xian not far away. For the first time, there was a trace of seriousness in his eyes. Bright sword. What a domineering sword technique. At this moment he was a little afraid, because if the young man in front of him was of a higher realm, that sword just now could very well have taken his life. That sword was a little too terrifying, and even now he was a little fearful. In the distance, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Still didn't work. The difference in realm was still too big. Even if he wanted to challenge someone 2 realms above him, it still wouldn't work. Unless he reached Ascension realm, then he might be able to fight him. But what now? Fight? He couldn't beat him. Escape? He definitely couldn't escape. Call for help? Who? Yi Xian's thoughts raced and soon his eyes lit up. He coldly looked at the middle-aged man in the distance. I advise you to retreat now or else, you won't be able to leave even if you want to. The middle-aged man's mouth slightly curled. You want to tell me that there's someone behind you, right? Xian sternly said. Of course, let me tell you, there's a very, very powerful god in my body. God? The middle-aged man chuckled. In your body? Young man, don't tell me you got a concussion from the beating? As he spoke, he slowly walked towards Xian. If there really is a god, why don't you ask him to come out and let me have a look? His right hand, which was hidden behind his back, had a green light. Following the green light, his right hand began to slowly recover. He knew that Xian was stalling for time, and he was also stalling for time. One must know that in this area, there were other strong people who were not weaker than him. He had to ensure that he was in good condition. Otherwise, if others knew that he was injured, even he couldn't guarantee that he would be safe. Xian slowly retreated. You're too weak. The god isn't interested in you. The middle-aged man sneered. Not interested in me? What a joke. I think the god you're talking about is afraid and doesn't dare to come out? At this moment, Pa. With a resounding slap, the middle-aged man was sent flying. Seeing this scene, Xian's eyelid twitched and he turned to run. Behind Xian, the middle-aged man climbed up. On his right cheek there was a small red claw mark. The middle-aged man touched his cheek with a dumbfounded expression. Who hit him? He looked around but didn't see anyone. Gradually, the middle-aged man's expression became solemn. He carefully looked around. Which expert is here? No one answered. Meanwhile, Xian had already run out of the dense forest. The middle-aged man was still on the spot, looking around cautiously. After Xian ran out of the dense forest, he saw Two-World City. He sped up and blood continuously flowed from the corner of his mouth. Not only that, but his arms were also constantly bleeding. Apart from that, the wound on his chest that had almost healed split open. As blood flowed out, the clothes on his chest quickly turned blood red. Heavily injured. In the battle with the middle-aged man, he was already heavily injured. In the end, he forcefully fused with the swords and then used one sword to decide life and death, which made his injuries even worse. It could be said that if he hadn't cultivated to the golden body realm and his body and organs were abnormally strong, he would have been finished. At the entrance of Two-World City, the white-clothed woman suddenly raised her head and looked into the distance. When she saw a figure in a sorry state, the white-clothed woman's hand trembled. Behind the white-clothed woman, the 9th princess also raised her head and looked at the figure in the distance. She was stunned. Soon Xian ran in front of the two women. When he saw the white-clothed woman, Xian was stunned. In the next moment he casually tossed the high-grade earth-rank martial skill in front of the 9th princess as if he was throwing trash. He slowly walked in front of the white-clothed woman and grinned. Why are you here? As soon as he finished speaking, a wisp of blood flowed from his mouth, and then he collapsed to the ground. The white-clothed woman instinctively caught Xian, while Xian lay in the white-clothed woman's embrace like a pile of mud. It was very soft. He instinctively wrapped his arms around the white-clothed woman's waist and buried his head in her chest. The white-clothed woman's body stiffened, but she didn't push Xian away. At a certain corner of the city wall, an old man stomped his feet. Miss, push him away. Push that little bastard away. Chapter 61. The old man's expression was extremely unsightly when he witnessed this scene, or it should be said that his expression was extremely gloomy. When had the young miss been so intimate with a man? Right at this moment, 3 figures flashed over from not too far away from the woman and Xian. The person in the lead was Beichen, and the other man and woman were standing behind Beichen. Xianxia glanced at them, and then she handed Xian over to the 9th princess before she turned around and gazed towards the side. Meanwhile, the old man appeared in front of Xianxia. Young miss, I've found out that some of them didn't abide by the rules of the game. Xianxia nodded slightly. I understand. As soon as she finished speaking, she walked slowly towards Beichen's group. The old man hesitated for a moment and seemed to want to say something, but he didn't in the end. Because he sensed that his young miss seemed to be angry. Beichen's expression instantly changed when she saw Xianxia. The other man and woman didn't know Xianxia, but she did. After all, was there anyone in the kingdom of Jiang who didn't know Xianxia? Beichen had extreme fear on her face. Many people weren't aware that Xianxia had been invited by the dean of Kuraki Academy, and the dean had personally invited her to join Kuraki Academy. Her answer was that if anyone below the age of 30 could defeat her, then she would join Kuraki Academy. At that time, 2 people had represented Kuraki Academy against Xianxia, and one of them was her. However, the outcome was that Xianxia hadn't joined Kuraki Academy. Beichen knew that he had no chance of obtaining that high-grade Earth-rank martial technique when he saw Xianxia. Beichen had the intention to retreat. Right at this moment, Xianxia suddenly vanished on the spot. Beichen's expression changed drastically when she witnessed this scene. She swiftly formed a square seal with her hands, and then she pressed it down lightly. Everlasting wind control. As soon as she spoke, a gust of violent wind suddenly appeared around her, and it instantly condensed into a tornado that enveloped her. Meanwhile, a spear suddenly appeared in Xianxia's grasp, and then she swiftly kicked the spear with her right foot. Bang! The spear shot forward like a bolt of lightning. Bang! The tornado exploded apart in the distance. At the same time, an afterimage flashed by. Bang! With a muffled sound, a figure was sent flying hundreds of feet away. It was none other than Beichen. Just as Beichen came to a stop, the ground behind her cracked open. Blood trickled down from the corner of her mouth. The expressions of the man and woman not far away instantly changed when they saw this. They were well aware of Beichen's strength, but he had been defeated in one move by the white-clothed lady? Both of them looked at Xianxia with eyes filled with curiosity and fear. Xianxia didn't stop there. After forcing Beichen back, her figure flickered and she vanished on the spot. At the instant she vanished, a silver spear appeared in front of Beichen. The spear was like a dragon, and the power contained within it was peerlessly domineering. Beichen's pupils constricted slightly, and a ferocious smile arose on the corners of her mouth. In the next moment she formed another seal with her hands. Bestial Soul Seal. Boom! A powerful aura swept out from her body. At the same time, an illusory beast shadow appeared behind her. As soon as this illusory beast shadow appeared here, an invisible pressure surged through the surroundings, and the ground was in a mess. The beast shadow roared furiously at Xianxia, and then it collided with her spear. Meanwhile, a speck of cold light flickered on the tip of the silver spear. As soon as they collided, bang! The beast shadow instantly dispersed while Beichen's figure was blasted flying, and he flew over 100 m away. On the other side, the man and woman didn't hesitate to charge at Xianxia when they saw Beichen lose. Xianxia didn't even spare a glance at them, and she just swept the spear towards the right. This sweep was extremely powerful, and it carried the aura of sweeping through an army. Bang! The man and woman hadn't even approached Xianxia when they were blasted back repeatedly by the might of the spear. On the other hand, Xianxia's figure shook, and she instantly appeared in front of Beichen. Bang! The spectators hadn't even seen how Xianxia attacked when Beichen was blasted over 100 m away. This time she crashed to the ground, and she just descended to the ground when Xianxia appeared in front of her like a ghost. After that, Xianxia suddenly stomped her foot against Beichen's stomach. Bang! Beichen's figure arched as her figure scraped against the ground as she flew over 30 m away, and she only stopped after smashing apart a huge rock. Xianxia was about to attack again when a white-haired old man suddenly appeared in front of her. He was one of the 3 vice deans of Kuraki Academy, Mo Song. Xianxia didn't stop there, and she smashed her spear down from above. Mo Song's eyes narrowed slightly as he flicked his sleeve, and then a formidable imposing aura swept out. Bang! That imposing aura was instantly blasted apart, and then Mo Song took a few steps back while Xianxia remained on the spot. There was astonishment in Mo Song's eyes when he witnessed this scene. Xianxia was just about to continue when Mo Song hurriedly said, "Country scholarin, it wasn't a student of my Kuraki Academy that injured him. It was the Marquis of the Ning Kingdom Wu Yunshan." Xianxia stopped, and then Mo Song pointed at a man and a woman nearby. "They're from the Ning Kingdom as well." Xianxia turned around to look at the man and woman, and then their expressions changed. At this moment they'd clearly recognized Xianxia as well. Xianxia, the genius of the Jiang Kingdom. Xianxia gazed at them while she slowly tightened her grip on her spear. Meanwhile, a weak voice resounded from behind her. "Missen." And Lanxiu immediately turned around and walked over to the ninth princess. At this moment Yi Xian had regained consciousness, but he was extremely weak. Yi Xian grinned, "There's no need to fight." And Lanxiu fell silent. Yi Xian smiled, "I suffered a huge loss today, but I'll get it back in the future." He didn't want to rely on Lanxiu for everything. It made him feel like a pretty boy, and he didn't like such a feeling. And Lanxiu glanced at Yi Xian and nodded, "All right." Mo Song instantly heaved a sigh of relief when he saw this. If Lanxiu really refused to let him off, then he really wouldn't know what to do. On the other hand, the expressions of the man and woman eased up slightly. Obviously they didn't want to fight Lanxiu. Mo Song glanced at Yi Xian and then he turned around and left with Bei Chen. The man and woman didn't dare stay any longer and they turned around and left as well. Yi Xian wanted to say something, but the ninth princess suddenly said, "Don't speak. Don't you think there's not enough blood?" And Lanxiu was just about to approach Yi Xian when Elder Ling suddenly walked over to her side. "Young miss, do you really want him to die?" The ninth princess and Yi Xian looked at Elder Ling when they heard this. And Lanxiu gazed at Elder Ling. Elder Ling smiled bitterly, "Young miss, you're the most outstanding person in our clan in the last 1,000 years. Countless powers and sects want to unite our clan through marriage. What do you think they would do if they found out that you're so close to that young man? They wouldn't dare to act against you, but I can guarantee that he might vanish from this world without anyone noticing one day. They have the strength to do that." When he spoke up to here, he paused slightly and continued, "Besides that, the patriarch should be aware of his expectations for you. Young miss, you can like others, but you can't like mediocre people." Yes, Yi Xian's natural talent isn't bad indeed, but he really doesn't have the qualifications to be with young miss unless he's able to become the sword emperor or sword master before the age of 30. But that's impossible. Young miss, the closer you get to him, the faster he'll die. I'm sure young miss is aware of that. His voice wasn't loud, but it wasn't soft either. So the ninth princess and Yi Xian heard it clearly. Obviously he'd said it on purpose for Yi Xian to hear. And Lanxiu fell silent. Elder Ling said in a low voice, "Young miss, you really can't get close to him. The world you're in is completely different from his, and he doesn't have the qualifications to enter your world." And Lanxiu paid no attention to Elder Ling and she looked at Yi Xian instead. "What do you think?" Yi Xian looked at Lanxiu. "Do you take me to be your friend?" And Lanxiu nodded. Yi Xian grinned. "Then leave the rest to me." And Lanxiu smiled when she heard this. Yi Xian was instantly stunned by this scene. And Lanxiu walked over to Yi Xian, and then she withdrew a white handkerchief and lightly wiped the blood off the corners of Yi Xian's mouth. After that she said in a light voice, "I hope you're still a graceful young man when we meet in the future." As soon as she finished speaking, she put away the handkerchief, turned around and left. "Can I look for you in the future?" Yi Xian suddenly asked from behind her. And Lanxiu stopped. "I'll be waiting for you in the Central Plains." As she finished speaking, she swiftly vanished into the distance. Elder Ling looked deeply at Yi Xian. "Why did you come to look for young miss?" Yi Xian grinned. "To talk about life, to talk about ideals." Elder Ling's face was ashen from anger and he glanced coldly at Yi Xian. "Don't come looking for humiliation." As he finished speaking, he turned around and hurriedly followed after her. Yi Xian just looked into the distance, and he still didn't withdraw his gaze even after Lanxiu had completely vanished into the distance. At this moment, the ninth princess who was by Yi Xian's side suddenly said, "What are you still looking at? They've all left." Yi Xian withdrew his gaze and he lightly moved his body. He seemed to have moved his wounds and it hurt so much that he gasped. The ninth princess glanced at Yi Xian. "Oh, now you know pain?" Yi Xian placed a hand on the ninth princess' shoulder, and his entire body leaned against her. The ninth princess frowned slightly, and just as she was about to push Yi Xian away, she was stunned when she saw the wound on Yi Xian's chest. That wound was the one that Yi Xian had suffered while trying to save her. At this moment, blood was still flowing out from that wound. Yi Xian took a deep breath. "Big sister, can't you help me to the hospital?" Duke Jiu returned to his senses and he said indifferently, "What hospital? I saw that you've already forgotten that you're injured when you were looking at Shaoan. So, looking at a beauty can actually heal injuries." Although she said this, she still slowly supported Yi Xian as they walked into the city. My back hurts and my legs hurt too. Can you carry me?" "No, I can't walk anymore." Do you believe that I won't beat you to death? Actually, I can still walk a few steps. Chapter 62. With the help of the ninth princess, Zhou Xian walked into Two World City. In the city, a group of soldiers immediately gathered around them. However, they were struck dumb when they saw the ninth princess supporting Zhou Xian with her arm. Although the ninth princess was forthright, she had never been so intimate with a man in the military camp. At this moment, the ninth princess suddenly glanced at the group of soldiers. What are you looking at? Get out of here. Hearing this, the group of soldiers immediately retreated in fear. At this moment, Zhou Xian's entire body collapsed. This time he was really exhausted. The ninth princess shook her head slightly and carried Zhou Xian to her tent. The tent was very simple. There was only a bed, a table and a sand table. There was nothing else. After the ninth princess placed Zhou Xian on her bed, she said, "Let Xiao Yi do it." Soon, a lady in a green dress walked in with a medical box in her hand. This person was the ninth princess's personal doctor. The ninth princess retreated to the side and looked at Zhou Xian. She said in a deep voice, "Treat him no matter what medicine you use." The lady in the green dress called Xiao Yi nodded slightly and walked to Zhou Xian's side. She gently placed her hand on Zhou Xian's pulse. After a while she frowned. "He's seriously injured." Hearing this, the ninth princess frowned. "Save him." Xiao Yi nodded. "Don't worry, Your Highness. Although his injuries are serious, they are not fatal. He just needs to recuperate. However, this recuperation may require many precious medicinal herbs." "This," the ninth princess said calmly, "the old man has given me many things. Take them out for him to use." Xiao Yi glanced at the ninth princess. "There's not much left. Those are for Your Highness in case you need them. Let him use them," the ninth princess added. Her voice was firm and unquestionable. Xiao Yi did not say anything else and nodded slightly. The ninth princess glanced at Zhou Xian, who was lying on the bed, before leaving the tent. Outside, the ninth princess opened her right hand, and the superior grade earth-ranked martial technique appeared in her palm. Actually, there was another reason why this high-grade earth-rank martial skill was so precious, and that was because the martial skill within the scroll was preserved using a special method. Simply put, it was utterly impossible to copy and it was unique. On the other hand, if this high-grade earth-rank martial technique were to be auctioned, then it would absolutely cause countless powers to fight madly for it. However, when that young man returned, he casually threw it to her as though he was throwing rubbish. At this moment, she naturally understood the true reason why the young man wanted this high-grade earth-rank martial technique in the bamboo house. He wanted to draw away those pursuers by himself, and he didn't intend to take possession of this high-grade earth-rank martial technique. She had indeed wronged him. The ninth princess turned her head and looked at Zhou Xian in the tent with a complicated expression. After an unknown period of time, Zhou Xian slowly opened his eyes. He stared blankly for a moment before he suddenly sat up. At this moment he was in a tent. He shook his head and very quickly he recalled everything that had happened before he fainted. After a moment he lowered his head to look at his body. At this moment his injuries had all been bandaged. As if he had thought of something, he opened his palm and a sword instantly appeared in his palm. The fusion of Ling Xiao and Ling Yu. The two swords had been merged into one. Now this sword had surpassed the spiritual sword and had reached the level of a bright sword. Unfortunately, he could not devour this bright sword. Otherwise, it was very likely that he would directly reach the ascendant state. Although he could not reach the ascendant state, this sword was now a bright sword. Swords were divided into common sword, spiritual sword, bright sword, true sword, heavenly sword, Taoist sword and immortal sword. The so-called spiritual sword referred to a sword that had a trace of spirituality. This kind of sword had broken away from the mortal world. As for the bright sword, it meant that the spiritual sword already had a trace of spirituality. If the spiritual sword was a hazy fetus, then the spiritual sword was a baby that had already been born. There was a huge difference in essence. Now, even though Zhou Xian was only at the chi-controlling realm with this bright sword, he could go against an ascendant realm expert without any pressure at all. Zhou Xian retracted his thoughts and glanced at the sword in his hand. One side of the sword was crystal blue and the other was crimson black. He thought for a moment and said, "You'll be called Ling Xiu Jian now. Right, Ling as in Yi Ling, Xiu as in Anlin Xiu." When he spoke up to this point he chuckled. Obviously he was very satisfied with the name he'd just given himself. Right at this moment, the ninth princess walked in with two large bowls in her hands. Zhou Xian hurriedly put his sword away and looked at her. She'd changed into a set of silver soft armor, and she looked especially charming. The ninth princess sat opposite Zhou Xian and passed one of the bowls to Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian took the bowl and it was a bowl of fragrant red braised meat. Underneath the red braised meat was white rice. The ninth princess said indifferently, "There's no need to be so particular in the military camp. Just make do with it." After saying that she began to eat in big bites without any scruples. Zhou Xian was also hungry so he picked up the bowl and started eating. A moment later the ninth princess stood up. "Accompany me to the Drunken Immortal restaurant tonight." To the Drunken Immortal restaurant? Zhou Xian was puzzled. The ninth princess said indifferently, "You were unconscious for 3 days and 3 days ago, I placed the Earth-level martial skill in the Drunken Immortal restaurant and asked them to auction it. They've been promoting it for 3 days and they'll auction it tonight." Zhou Xian nodded, "All right." The ninth princess glanced at Zhou Xian. "You don't have any other thoughts?" Zhou Xian was stunned. "What thoughts?" The ninth princess looked straight at Zhou Xian. "You exchanged your life for that Earth-level martial skill so it can be said that it's yours. Now that I'm auctioning it, will you feel uncomfortable?" "So that's what it was about." Zhou Xian smiled. "Why would I feel uncomfortable?" The ninth princess just looked at Zhou Xian, not saying a word. Zhou Xian thought for a moment then said, "We're friends. Shouldn't friends help each other?" The ninth princess looked at Zhou Xian for a long time. Finally she turned around and was about to leave, but the moment she turned around, the golden saber on her waist suddenly fell in front of Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian was stunned, then subconsciously picked it up. Then he handed the golden saber to the ninth princess. The ninth princess turned her head and looked at him coldly. "You've touched it, I don't want it anymore." With that she turned around and left the tent. In the same place Zhou Xian was dumbfounded. "What the hell?" After a while Zhou Xian came back to his senses. He looked at the golden saber in his hand and was stunned. Because this golden saber turned out to be a spiritual weapon. Moreover, it was a supreme-grade spiritual weapon, even better than the Lingxiao sword from before. Zhou Xian hurriedly chased after her and soon he caught up with the ninth princess. Your golden saber is supreme grade, you really don't want it?" The ninth princess turned her head and looked at Zhou Xian coldly. "I finally know why you've been single for so many years." With that she turned around and quickly disappeared into the distance. Zhou Xian. Pfft. At this moment laughter came from behind Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian turned around and behind him was a woman in a green dress. It was Xiao Yi who had treated him. "You are?" Zhou Xian asked. When Xiao Yi treated him he was already unconscious so he did not know the woman in front of him. Xiao Yi smiled slightly. "When you were unconscious I was the one who bandaged your wounds." Hearing this Zhou Xian hurriedly cupped his fists. "Thank you very much." Xiao Yi glanced at the golden saber in Zhou Xian's hand and then said, "Are you going to return this saber to Her Highness?" Zhou Xian nodded. "This saber is very precious and she uses a saber. Without this saber her strength will drop a lot." Xiao Yi suddenly covered her mouth and laughed. "You really relied on your strength to be single." With that she turned around and left with the medicine box. Zhou Xian. A moment later Zhou Xian returned to the tent, and then he took out 2 superior-grade spirit stones and began to absorb them. Although there were external items to heal, spirit qi was the best medicine. Just like that for hours later night fell. The ninth princess arrived at Zhou Xian's tent. No, it should be said that she returned to her own tent. At this moment the ninth princess wasn't wearing silver armor. Instead she was wearing a tight-fitting silver white dress. The dress was very simple and there were almost no unnecessary patterns, but it revealed a different feeling. Moreover, her hair was tied up with a white ribbon and hung behind her head, which made her seem even more heroic. The most eye-catching part of her was her eyes. Her eyes weren't very large but they were sharp like knives and they were a pair of eyes that one would never forget. The ninth princess flicked her finger, and a brand new robe appeared in front of Zhou Xian. "Change your clothes, let's go." After saying that she walked out of the tent. After a while Zhou Xian left the tent. When she saw Zhou Xian outside the tent the ninth princess was slightly stunned. At this moment Zhou Xian was wearing a black brocade robe. He was tall, and the black brocade robe made his body look even thinner and straighter. His facial features were well defined, and he was definitely handsome, especially his eyes, which were calm and had a hint of determination. Coupled with his long black hair, it could be said that Yi Xian was really handsome. The ninth princess sized up Yi Xian and then nodded. You can obviously rely on your looks to make a living, but you insist on cultivating so hard. You can do it. Yi Xian. The ninth princess turned and walked into the distance. Many big forces will definitely send people here tonight, but I don't know how much they can sell for. Yi Xian followed beside her. Will there be a problem? The ninth princess said indifferently. Don't worry, this is the Drunken Immortal Restaurant's territory. If there is a problem, they will also be responsible. However, as long as it's not Kuraki College, there won't be a problem, and Kuraki College will definitely not become enemies with the Drunken Immortal Restaurant for an upper earth level martial skill. Yi Xian nodded, and as if thinking of something, he asked again, previously when I walked around your camp, I didn't see that woman called Ayu. Is she not in your camp? Naturally, he still remembered this woman. The ninth princess pondered for a moment and then said, Fine, you're not an outsider. Ayu was picked up by an old woman not long after you left. As she said that, she glanced at Yi Xian. Don't worry, it's definitely a great blessing for her. Hearing this, Yi Xian nodded. That's good. At this moment, a man in black suddenly appeared beside the ninth princess. The man in black wanted to approach the ninth princess, but the ninth princess said indifferently, Just say it. The man in black glanced at Yi Xian and then nodded. Your Highness, the Tang Kingdom and the Ning Kingdom have also sent people to participate in this auction. Hearing this, the ninth princess's expression suddenly turned cold, and her eyes were as sharp as a knife. After a moment, she looked at Yi Xian and chuckled. Get ready, we're going to go all out tonight. Yi Xian. P.S. I have a small request. I want to see your treasured tickets. Brothers, one ticket can't go to Thailand, can't book a young model, can't go to Singapore, but if you give it to me, I might be able to go. Asking for tickets. Chapter 63. Yi Xian could not help but glance at the ninth princess in front of him. He had killed countless people. In Green City, if he did not kill, others would kill him. However, his intuition told him that the people he had killed were not even worth mentioning compared to the ninth princess in front of him. However, this was normal. After all, she was the commander of an army. When she killed, she would not kill one or two people but a group of them. At this moment, the ninth princess seemed to have thought of something and suddenly shook her head. No, you can't get involved in these battles. After saying that, she walked into the distance. Yi Xian followed her. If you need help, the ninth princess interrupted Yi Xian. The Jiang country, the Ning country and some other messy forces. They are targeting me. I have the protection of the army and the elites of the entire Jiang country, but you don't. So you can't get involved. Well, it's decided. Yi Xian was speechless. After a while, the ninth princess and Yi Xian arrived at the Drunken Immortal Restaurant. Although the entire two-world city was a little out of place, the Drunken Immortal Restaurant was magnificent and magnificent. It really did not fit in with the two-world city. As soon as the two of them walked in, a delicate and pretty woman came out to welcome them. The woman bowed slightly to the ninth princess. Ninth princess, your private room is ready. Please follow me. After saying that, the woman gestured for them to enter and led the way. The ninth princess and Yi Xian followed. After a while, the two of them arrived at a luxurious private room. The private room was decorated luxuriously and the floor was covered with a thick layer of animal skin. In front of the two of them was a crystal table. Behind the table was a transparent crystal wall. The woman bowed slightly to the ninth princess. Your Highness, there is still 1 hour before the auction officially starts. Please wait for a moment. After saying that, the woman left. Soon, two women brought some tea, fruits and snacks into the private room. The ninth princess glanced at the two women. You may leave. The two women bowed slightly and left. Only the ninth princess and Yi Xian were left in the private room. Yi Xian looked at the ninth princess. Ninth princess, Jiangjiu. The ninth princess suddenly said, You can call me Little Nine like Shaoan. Little Nine. Yi Xian nodded and didn't think too much about it. He immediately said, Lil Jiu, we obtained a high-grade earth-rank martial skill from the Sword Master's abode, And those big shots above are really going to watch helplessly as such a high-grade Earth-rank martial skill falls into our hands? Zhang Jiu glanced at Yi Xian. You're too naive. Yi Xian was speechless. Zhang Jiu said calmly, those big shots spent so much effort to develop this sword master's cave abode. Do you think they didn't gain anything? Do you know that the dwelling of the sword master of the two-world mountain no longer belongs to the kingdom of Jiang? Why? Yi Xian didn't understand. Zhang Jiu said in a low voice, then why did the sword master choose that location to establish his abode? That's because there's a natural spiritual vein there. If there's a spiritual vein, then there's definitely a spiritual mine. A spiritual vein is a priceless treasure. If it's developed, it'll be countless times more valuable than an earth-rank martial technique. The reason why the sword master sent the young people of the various organizations there to search for the treasure is so that they can eat the meat and leave some soup for the people below them. That way everyone will be happy. As she said that, she fell silent for a moment before she continued. Logically speaking, that spiritual mine is within the borders of the kingdom of Jiang, so it should belong to the kingdom of Jiang. However, even if they gave it to the kingdom of Jiang wouldn't dare to accept it. The old man was rather smart. He decisively gave away that piece of land in exchange for a place to compete for the treasure. Actually, that's already very good. Yi Xian shook his head with a smile. It was just as he had expected. It was not that simple. At this moment, Zhang Jiu added, in this world there are some struggles that are out in the open. This is something that everyone can see, but there are also some struggles that are hidden. These kinds of struggles are invisible, but they can also be the cruelest. Just like this time. You might not know, but it wasn't just 3 Nether Passage Realm experts that died during the development of the Sword Master's abode. According to my information, at least 10 Nether Passage Realm experts have fallen this time, and it's even to the extent that even stronger experts have appeared. As soon as she finished speaking, she seemed to have thought of something and she looked at Yi Xian. Don't be fooled by the fact that Songlan Academy is on the verge of closing down. That old man of yours isn't a simple figure. So long as he's here, Songlan Academy won't close down. This time he came to look for all of you. Obviously he still wants to make a move after staying silent for so many years. However, this is normal. All those years ago, the students of Songlan Academy could be said to have been practically slaughtered by Kuraki Academy. Even his 2 sons and grandsons died miserably. Yi Xian glanced at Zhang Jiu. Why are you telling me so much? Zhang Jiu thought for a moment, then said, I don't want you to become a sacrificial lamb for those factions' struggles. Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, the transparent crystal wall in front of them suddenly lit up. An image appeared on the crystal wall. Within the image was a round stage, and on the round stage stood a woman in a red dress with an extremely good figure. The woman in the red dress bowed slightly to her surroundings. Greetings, everyone. I am Su Qing, the manager of the Two Realms City Management of the Drunken Immortal Restaurant. Tonight's auction will be hosted by me. As she spoke, she looked around and smiled brightly. Tonight, only 3 items will be auctioned. Although it's not much, it definitely won't disappoint everyone. As soon as Su Qing finished speaking, a woman carried an exquisite box onto the round stage. The woman placed the box on the round table in front of the woman in the red dress, then retreated. Su Qing opened the box. Inside the box there was a thumb-sized green elixir. Within the room, Zhang Jiu's expression instantly changed slightly when he saw this elixir. A space-breaking elixir. Yi Xian gazed at the crystal wall before him. On the round stage, Su Qing grinned. A space-breaking elixir. It has an 80% chance of allowing one to advance from the Qi-controlling realm to the hovering realm. Such an elixir is probably very rare in the Jiang Kingdom. The starting price is 1 million gold coins, and every bid must be at least 200,000 gold coins. Within the room, Yi Xian's hands trembled when he heard Su Qing. 1 million gold coins? Yi Xian's eyes were filled with disbelief. After all, the entire city's income for half a year probably didn't even amount to 1 million gold coins. Yet now, a tiny elixir had a starting price of 1 million gold coins. When did gold coins become so worthless? Zhang Jiu spoke indifferently by Yi Xian's side. That's enough to shock you? Yi Xian nodded. Very. Zhang Jiu shook his head and chuckled. Do you know that most of the wealth in this world is controlled by a small number of people? To put it simply, the poor are very poor but the rich are very rich. Yi Xian touched the money pouch on his waist and shook his head. I'm really king poor. The corners of the ninth princess's mouth curled up slightly, and a touched smile appeared on her face. Before long the elixir was bought for 3,600,000 gold coins. 3,600,000 gold coins. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. It's really poverty that limits my imagination. At this moment, a woman carried a box onto the round stage. Su Qing opened the box and within it was a short saber. The blade was extremely thin and the handle was pitch black. An unknown beast shadow was engraved on it. On the stage Su Qing smiled. The name of the saber is Striking Shadow, a supreme grade spiritual weapon. Among the spiritual weapons I dare not say anything else, but in the Jiang Kingdom, this saber is only inferior to the golden saber of our Ninth Highness. The starting price is 2 million gold coins, and every bid must be at least 300,000 gold coins. 2 million gold coins. In the private room Yi Xian was stunned and then he turned to look at Jiang Jiu. Jiang Jiu raised the teacup in front of him and lightly sipped it, but he didn't say anything. Yi Xian looked at the golden saber hidden on his waist, and then he smiled bitterly. It's too precious. Jiang Jiu still didn't say anything. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and then he said, "Thank you." Jiang Jiu turned to look at Yi Xian. "If you want to return it to me, I'll definitely beat you until you can't take care of yourself." Yi Xian grinned and he felt quite happy in his heart. Jiang Jiu shook his head. "You idiot." Soon the saber on the round stage was bought for 5 million gold coins. 5 million. When he heard this price, Yi Xian felt his heartbeat speed up. 5 million. He couldn't help but look at the golden saber on his waist. Is he going to sell it? As if he had the same thought, Jiang Jiu suddenly said, "If you dare to sell it, I'll definitely cut off a certain part of you and make you a eunuch in the palace." Yi Xian. At this moment on the round stage Su Qing looked around and then he smiled slightly. Everyone, next is the main event. As Su Qing's voice fell, a woman carried a black iron box onto the round stage. Su Qing opened the black iron box and inside the box was a black scroll. Su Qing smiled and said, "High-grade Earth-class martial technique. Finger of Nirvana. A genuine high-grade Earth-class martial technique. If a levitation realm expert learns it, they can easily fight a nether passage realm expert. If a nether passage realm expert learns it, they won't be invincible among those of the same level, but there will be few who can match them. And if an expert above the nether passage realm learns it with this martial technique, their strength will increase by at least 40%. After saying this she looked around. "I'll cut to the chase. The starting price of this martial technique is 15 million gold coins, and each increment must be no less than 2 million gold coins. 20 million. As soon as Su Qing's voice fell, someone immediately made a bid. In the private room, when Yi Xian heard this price, he was completely dumbfounded. 20 million. Holy shit, 20 million. No, someone had already made a bid of 30 million. Jiang Jiu glanced at the excited Yi Xian beside him and said softly, "Now you know how terrifying the value of the thing you've thrown at me is, right?" Yi Xian turned to look at Jiang Jiu and then he grinned and then waved the golden saber in his hand. "No matter how precious, it's not as precious as the friendship between us, isn't it?" He wasn't lying. In his heart, whether it was friendship or kinship, it couldn't be measured with money. Fundamental. Jiang Jiu retracted his gaze, but the corner of his mouth curled up slightly. At this moment, the bid had already reached 46 million. And at this moment, an extremely discordant voice suddenly rang out in every corner of the drunken immortal restaurant. 1 gold coin, I want this martial technique. Inside the private room, several shadows suddenly appeared behind Jiang Jiu and Yi Xian like ghosts, and these people's expressions were incomparably vigilant. Jiang Jiu frowned slightly. There really is someone who dares to cause trouble for the drunken immortal restaurant. At this moment, a voice that hadn't been heard for a long time suddenly rang out in Yi Xian's mind. "Run! Run!" Yi Xian was stunned and in the next moment he grabbed Jiang Jiu's hand, turned around and ran. Chapter 64. Run. It was none other than the mysterious woman who hadn't made an appearance in a very long time. Yi Xian naturally didn't doubt her words at all. When they saw Yi Xian pull Jiao along and run, Jiao's guards were first stunned, but it didn't take long for them to instinctively obstruct Yi Xian's path. Yi Xian gazed at Jiao and Jiao glanced at him and said, "Retreat." As soon as he finished speaking, their group swiftly retreated from the Immortal Indulgence Inn. Right at the instant they retreated from the Immortal Indulgence Inn, a strand of formidable force suddenly rained down from the top of the inn. Bang! The Immortal Indulgence Inn instantly exploded apart while numerous afterimages flew out from within it. Besides that, some shrill cries resounded as well. Yi Xian, Jiao, and the others retreated repeatedly when they witnessed this scene. Both of their eyes were extremely solemn. Right at this moment, a black-robed figure suddenly flashed out from the ruins of the Immortal Indulgence Inn, and the high-grade earth-rank martial technique from before was in the black-robed figure's hand. The black-robed figure was about to leave when a furious shout suddenly resounded from afar. "How dare you!" As soon as this voice resounded, a strand of invisible pressure suddenly descended from the sky and pressed down upon the black-robed figure. Meanwhile, the black-robed figure opened his right palm, and then a bolt of lightning suddenly flashed out from the center of his palm. Bang! A world-shaking rumble instantly resounded through the sky. At the same time, the bolt of lightning instantly illuminated the night sky to the point it seemed like it was daytime. The divine combination realm. Meanwhile, an old man appeared in front of the black-robed figure, and he stared fixedly at the black-robed figure. "Who exactly are you? Why have you come to my Immortal Indulgence Inn?" "The Immortal Indulgence Inn?" The black-robed figure suddenly started laughing. "Is it very great?" His voice was strange and hoarse and he'd obviously concealed it. The old man was about to speak when the black-robed figure suddenly raised his right hand and pressed it down. Bang! A bolt of lightning blasted down from the top of the old man's head. The old man's expression changed drastically. He shook his hands towards the sky, and then a strand of formidable force surged out from the center of his palm. However, this force had only just come into contact with the bolt of lightning when it exploded into pieces. In the next moment, bang! The old man directly smashed into the ground. In the sky, the black-robed man did not attack again. Instead, his figure shook as he shot towards the distant horizon. In the blink of an eye, the black-robed man disappeared into the distant night. Down below, the old man crawled out of the ruins. He stared at the distant horizon and crushed a thumb-sized stone with his right hand. The stone trembled slightly and turned into a ray of black light that disappeared into the sky. Obviously, he was calling for help. Not long after, the sound of fighting suddenly came from the distant horizon. Obviously, the powerhouses of the drunken immortal Inn had arrived. At this moment, a woman slowly walked up to Yi Xian and the ninth princess. This person was Su Qing, who had auctioned the item earlier. Su Qing bowed slightly to the ninth princess and said, "Your Highness, I'm sorry. The drunken immortal Inn will recover the item. Please give the drunken immortal Inn some time." The ninth princess looked at the sky and nodded. "I'll come to the drunken immortal restaurant in 5 days." After that, she turned around and left with Yi Xian. After walking for a while, the mysterious woman's voice suddenly rang in Yi Xian's mind. "Go after them." "Go after them?" Yi Xian was stunned. "Hurry up." The mysterious woman's voice rang again. That person just now had the aura of a Dao Law. The aura of a Dao Law. Yi Xian's heart skipped a beat. "Senior, why didn't you say so earlier? I should have chased after them earlier." The mysterious woman said calmly, "That person just ran away and you're already chasing after them. Do you have a death wish?" Yi Xian was speechless. "What's wrong?" Jiao, who was beside Yi Xian, asked. Yi Xian collected his thoughts and looked at Jiao. "I have something urgent to do. You go back first." After that, he turned around and ran. Jiao frowned slightly. After a moment of silence, she looked at an old man beside her. "Follow him. Don't let anything happen to him." The old man nodded. His figure trembled and he disappeared on the spot. However, not long after, the old man returned to Jiao's side with a rather ugly expression. "Your Highness, I lost him." Jiao's eyes narrowed slightly. "How is that possible?" The old man spoke in a low voice. "I don't know. His aura is completely gone. It's like he vanished from the world." Jiao gazed into the distance when she heard this. After a short moment, she spoke softly. "That fellow, is quite mysterious. Outside Two World City, Yi Xian was dashing madly all the way, and it didn't take long for him to enter the boundless depths of the mountains. As soon as he entered the mountains, he heard the sounds of battle resounding from deep within. Stop! The mysterious woman's voice resounded abruptly. Yi Xian hurriedly stopped. Senior, the mysterious woman said, wait for them to finish fighting. Yi Xian found a place to sit down cross-legged, and then he spoke in a low voice. Senior, what exactly are Dao laws? The mysterious woman said, you'll find out in the future. Yi Xian nodded and then he said, Senior, that fellow on the second level has woken up. The mysterious woman said, I know. Yi Xian hurriedly said, can you beat it up? Flap. Yi Xian was blasted flying. He flew over 100 m away and he even smashed through 2 trees along the way. When he crawled up from the ground, there was a red handprint on the right side of his face. Meanwhile, the mysterious woman spoke abruptly, you deserve a beating. Yi Xian was speechless. The mysterious woman continued, forget about that fellow on the second level for now. The important matter at hand is to quickly obtain a Dao law. This pagoda was heavily damaged all those years ago, so I'm afraid it'll be a huge problem if it doesn't have a Dao law. Yi Xian rubbed his right cheek and nodded, I know. But that fellow on the second level. Don't worry, it wouldn't dare to kill you. The mysterious woman said, you're the master of the pagoda now. Once you die, the entire pagoda will be without a master. At that time, it'll have to face the pagoda itself. Even though the pagoda doesn't have a Dao law, its instinctive resistance isn't something it can resist. However, the pagoda won't act rashly with you here. So they won't let you die before it comes out. Yi Xian was quite speechless. The pagoda isn't a threat at all with me here. What the hell? Bang. Right at this moment, a shocking explosion resounded from the mountain range in the distance, and then countless bolts of lightning dashed through the horizon like silver snakes. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched when he witnessed this scene. Senior, that fellow is too strong. Would my life be in danger if I chase after it like this? The mysterious woman spoke indifferently, fortune comes from danger. Yi Xian was speechless. Numerous explosions were still resounding in the distance. Moreover, Yi Xian noticed that the ground and the trees in the surroundings had actually started to tremble. What sort of expert is this? Yi Xian's expression was extremely solemn. Right at this moment, the distant sky suddenly calmed down. The mysterious woman's voice resounded. Chase after it. Yi Xian didn't hesitate and immediately chased after it. The further he went, the more shocked he was. Because many trees along the way had turned pitch black. Moreover, the ground had even cracked open as if it had experienced an earthquake. Yi Xian felt slightly guilty when he witnessed this scene. There was no doubt that the black-robed man's strength was absolutely not something he could go against right now. The mysterious woman spoke abruptly, I'm here. Why are you panicking? Yi Xian hurriedly said with a serious expression. With Senior's words, I wouldn't panic even if I had to challenge the entire drunken immortal in on my own. As soon as he finished speaking, he sped up. In next to no time he arrived at a small hill. On the other side of the hill, a small hill had been shattered, and there were bolts of lightning dashing through the ground from time to time. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. That black-robed man is already so strong, so why does he still want to seize that earth-rank martial technique? The mysterious woman said, that martial technique from before is only able to bring forth its true might in the hands of that black-robed man. Moreover, if he possesses that martial technique, then that black-robed man's strength would at least increase by 30 to 40%. When she spoke up to here, she paused for a moment and then she continued, go to the right. There's a waterfall over 1 kilometer to the right. Yi Xian flashed towards the right repeatedly when he heard this, and it didn't take long for him to arrive before a waterfall. Yi Xian was instantly stunned when he laid eyes on the waterfall. It was exactly that waterfall that he and Zhangjiu had been hiding at not too long ago. Yi Xian arrived at the small hole near the waterfall. Sure enough, there was a person lying there and it was exactly that black-robed man. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. Senior, are the Dao laws in this fellow's possession? The mysterious woman replied, no. Yi Xian was speechless. The mysterious woman continued. He has the aura of a Dao law on him. In other words, he's definitely approached the Dao laws from somewhere. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. This fellow seems to be unconscious right now. I'll ask him when he wakes up? That's not realistic. I'll probably be beaten to death if he wakes up. The mysterious woman suddenly said, "This fellow isn't unconscious." Yi Xian was speechless. Right at this moment, a terrifying wave of pressure suddenly enveloped Yi Xian, and Yi Xian felt like a mountain was pressing down on him. He wasn't able to move at all. Yi Xian hurriedly said in his heart, "Senior, quickly make a move." However, the mysterious woman didn't speak. Yi Xian's face instantly turned pale. "Senior, don't screw me over." The mysterious woman still didn't speak. Right at this moment, the black-robed person suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. At this moment, the black-robed person had already taken off her mask, and a large part of her black robe was also torn. Thus, Yi Xian could clearly see the black-robed person's face. When he saw the black-robed person's face, Yi Xian was instantly stunned. A woman. The black-robed person before him was actually a woman. Moreover, it was a peerlessly beautiful woman. Her eyes were very large, calm and cold, and her face was flushed and delicate. She was like a sparkling and translucent piece of jade that would cause one's imagination to run wild. When her facial features were put together, there was an indescribable beauty to her. Most importantly, the pair of huge breasts in front of her. They were too huge, but they didn't lose their balance because her figure was exquisite to begin with. This was a woman that could make a man's blood boil with just a glance. However, at this moment Yi Xian's blood did not boil, only his entire body was ice cold. The woman stared at Yi Xian. "Who are you?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and then he said, "Just pretend that I've never been here, all right?"